It began with a dream of Jonathan Hickman's that the X-Men as a franchise in comics had long been dormant, which we all know to be true, considering that Marvel Comics put them on ice essentially during the Fox era, the Fox film era. And Hickman's dream was that the X-Men could be more, that they could be freed from the shackles of Marvel Comics edict, that they could be bigger than they had been for decades prior, that he could do something so revolutionary that it would change the landscape for mutants forever, or at least until the next reboot or retcon or whatever. And when that dream was realized, it looked like House and Powers of X. Something that changed the game for mutants in a way that let us fans know the X-Men were back. 5 years later, we have reached the end of the dream. And for some of us, that dream it morphed into a nightmare. But it's over. We exist now on the other side of the Krakoan age. Long live the Krakoan age. This is the X-Men Krakoan age post-mortem. We are going to talk about it all from stem to stern, from A to Z, from Hawks to Pox to Rocks to Fox, P, F, P, H, O, X.
It's a Star Trek character, I think.
PFAs.
Yeah, you're right.
We're going to get into everything. And the STACKOA. You can see a little bit of it behind me now, maybe. That is not all. And we do have a prize for the person who can get the closest to the accurate number without going over. I cannot wait to present that to you. And I also pulled aside a few of my variants that I bought over the years and things like that. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. We've got a full house on deck. We've got Cale.
What's up, hot dogs?
Marco.
X-Lo-X.
Tyler.
Wakanda, Krakoa forever. Sorry, wrong one.
And of course, I'm Sean. And you guys are you. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here with us for this monumental occasion. Been waiting for this for months. So we're going to get right into it. Now, I have done a lot to prepare for this conversation. I poured through countless interviews. Huge thank you to X-Men Mondays over at AITP Comics. They did a lot of work there. Over 250 editions
Holy shit.
Yeah, over 5 years. Chris Hassan interviews with every single creator who was involved in the Krakoa era in any way. I pulled from all of those. I pulled from podcasts. I pulled from everything. I pulled all-nighters to get this done.
This isn't so much of a post-mortem as it might be like an autopsy.
It's that, yeah, it's an autopsy as well. That is a great point. Absolutely. So let's jump right in. Let's start at the beginning. And if you're unfamiliar, the beginning is not house number one necessarily. The beginning is when the dream that Jonathan Hickman has started. So, as it turns out, Hickman first started pitching for the X-Men while he was still writing Ultimate Comics. That goes as far back as, I want to say, the early 2010s.
Yeah.
And so that's when
my guess.
Yeah. That's when he first started pitching for it. He says that the idea, well, I'll let him speak on it. So this is what Hickman said. I've had a pretty good idea of what I would do with the X-Men for a few years now. And, that goes back to the Ultimates. Most of the general plans can be found in Powers of 10. The House of X stuff came about when it became clear just how much bandwidth we'd have inside Marvel and the X office. So Hickman talks a lot about the fact that he was turned down constantly. Every year he pitched, and every year he was turned down. And at a certain point, when he was doing Secret Wars, he came to the conclusion that he would not work for Marvel again. He was done. And one of the interesting things, as an aside, is something, I'm not sure what it was, but something was happening at Marvel around that time that he doesn't discuss that made him not want to be there and made it a place that felt very chaotic in a way that it wasn't before. But he doesn't expound on that, so I have no idea what he's referencing. But it made him leave.
Huh.
Yeah. And so Marvel courted him and pursued him heavily to come back. We have all heard the stories about Jim Lee, the meetings with Jim Lee to go over to DC. Hickman is notably a DC guy. The only thing from Marvel he really loved were the X-Men. And so Marvel approached him. They pulled up the Brinks truck and they said, listen, we need you. What do you want to do? So he returned to his X-Men pitch, and now they were into it. Now they wanted to hear his mouth, because now Daddy Disney bought Fox.
Yeah.
So now they were wide open, legs akimbo for Hickman's X offering.
So, clarify, Sean. It was never Marvel was looking for X-Men pitches because they had the rights. They were trying to get Hickman, and it just happened to be a serendipity that X-Men was now something they can do stuff with.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, it was once again like, I have these X-Men ideas, and then they finally said, whoa, so what are your ideas?
After years.
After almost a decade at that point.
Just like throwing shit at them and saying, yeah, we'll pitch it. Yeah. Oh, hold on a sec. It's beneficial to us now. What are you saying?
And so he had the responsibility of going and pitching his big idea, which at the beginning was really just Powers of 10. It was the stuff that we get in there, and I think you can kind of extrapolate that is in reference to, in my idea, that's in reference to the Moira stuff. Because that, I feel like, is more, what were you thinking, Cale?
I would say, wasn't that the Nimrod stuff, the more out there computer, what are those guys called?
Yeah, the Phalanx and the Dominions and the Technarchy. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that stuff was probably a part of the pitch, but there was something inside of the pitch that made people mad. There was something inside that initial pitch that made even Jordan D. White, the editor throughout the entire era, balk. Hickman talks about the fact that even Joe Quesada was a part of the staff at that point still. And he was like, wait a second, this is a little too much here. So he had to run the gauntlet with every editor that Marvel employs to convince them that this was a good idea. And it took some time and it took some finesse, but eventually he got the green light. He got the green light. Go ahead.
I can't find my green light button on my soundboard, but yeah.
He got the green light, and then it became time to pitch to come up with a writing staff to figure out, okay, so what's after this? Because now he had convinced them that this was a good enough idea to make it the idea, to give him carte blanche to do anything. And what he wanted to do is what I refer to as the great Jonathan Hickman experiment. Can we curate a line that starts from me, that starts from House and Powers, and then creates space for all these different books and all these different worlds of Krakoa now?
You know he created a graph for that pitch.
Oh yeah, had to have, right?
Full PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. And so he said this. there's a pretty massive difference between planning for a single book and the direction of an entire line. So I took about 5 months and did a bunch of rereading, quite a bit of outlining. I wrote a bunch of documents for both Marvel editorial and the upcoming writers. It was quite a lot. Any homework that was needed to be done was done. So when he pitched it to the writers, they were much, much more excited. But they didn't have the full scope. They didn't have access to all the scripts. They didn't have access to the actual work completed. So some of them had to work with not as much knowledge as they would have liked. I'll say this last bit. A notable one is actually Brian Hill. Brian Hill, this is something that I had no idea about. So Brian Hill, of course, did Fallen Angels, which is easily the most critically and commercially unsuccessful of the initial lineup of books.
Yeah.
And the reason it feels so disconnected is because Brian was actually working on Titans for DC at that time, the show. And he had his irons in some DC fire, and they weren't too happy with the idea that he was working closely with Marvel. So they wouldn't give him the space to attend the summits that Marvel was doing for
What?
this.
Come on.
And he had to, huh?
That's shitty.
Yeah. He had to work from his brain as far as like what to do, which is why his book also feels the most 90s.
There was no hey, like you know when you're working corporate, it's like, hey, can I get a recording of that meeting?
I guess not. Yeah, and Hickman took it on himself, but he also put it on Marvel, and obviously the relationship with DC as to why this one specifically didn't work. Brian is the only writer that they really pulled in from the outside at that time, as well. So it makes sense, but it sucks that it went that way.
Because Brian's so much better of a writer than that, you know, and that's not to say anything about the quality of Fallen Angels, just that he deserves so much better than that.
Well,
Totally.
and even like when he was on the show, I wasn't here for it, but I listened. He talked about how he misunderstood what the mission objective was.
Yeah.
And he was trying to go for a completely different tone, and he just missed the mark.
There's no way he could have understood it without being in those conversations. Even if you had like the pitch document,
Yeah, the graph.
You just need to hear from the man,
Yeah.
or see the work. We could all see the vision when we read House and Powers, but if you didn't have that in front of you, how do you move forward? So let's talk about it. House and Powers of X, House of X, Powers of 10. Those were the books that kickstarted this era. It was 12 total issues, published weekly, one House, one Powers, one House, one Powers, for 12 straight weeks. Hickman wrote every single word. Pepe Larraz did the art for House. R.B. Silva on Powers. Martha Garcia colored every single piece of this, which is remarkable. This began in July 24th of 2019. That was the first issue of House, and the final issue of Powers released October 9th, 2019. So these were revolutionary books. All of us were there at the time. We all know how we felt about them as they were coming out. They changed the game for the X-Men. Prior to this, they were in the Matthew Rosenberg era, which, was not very popular. Very panned, I would say. It was very dark, very grim. I was reading those books. I liked them. But there was definitely not a lot of hype surrounding them, as much as Marvel tried to make it so. And so when Marvel put the initial images and promo stuff out for House and Powers, we were kind of like, all right, well, we've done this song and dance before. They've put big names behind these books before. Is this a real attempt? Like, are they really going to do it?
I remember that discourse of like just not trusting, and feeling like, okay, are we ultimately going to get swerved? And I think I thought I don't remember if this is true or not, but I remember a feeling of, well, if Hickman's on it, they must be like we're going off of Hickman's name. If he's on it, I trust him. He's going to produce good work, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
And even then, like the artist team, RB Silva
Yep.
and Pepe Larraz, I wasn't too familiar with prior to this. So even then, I was like, oh, okay. You know, I remember Hickman and Asad Arabic on Secret Wars, and I remember that was good. But I'm only really familiar with 1 out of 3 of these creators. So I was like, and I really didn't care much for the end of Rosenberg's run. But I don't think that was his fault.
It is wild to think that that's how we could feel going in, and now the Larraz style is like, oh, that's just modern X-Men. That is post 2020 X-Men. Like, that's it.
I mean, once
2018 X-Men.
once I saw the art, I'm like, oh, this is like imminent. I'm in. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All we had to go off of at that time was the Mark Brooks promotional images, which were phenomenal, but they were also very confusing because they had characters in, you know, various outfits from their history. So, like, you might have Jean Grey in, just for example, her Phoenix outfit, but then Cyclops in his very first outfit, you know, alongside Emma in her new X-Men outfit.
Yep.
And so we just didn't really know what that meant. Ultimately, now we know that it really didn't mean a lot. It was just like, hey, they're going to wear a ton of different shit throughout this era. It's going to be cool.
There was a focus on the fashion of the X-Men, which, you know, admittedly is a massive part of the franchise.
And I think it's fair to say, even now in retrospect, that House and Powers was a game changer along the lines of New X-Men by Morrison, along the lines of, you know, the earliest work of Claremont, Giant Size, X-Men. I think it did what it set out to do. And I think that it probably, for me at least, is still the best of all the 5 years worth of stuff that we got.
It's like if I'm viewing an X-Men timeline chronologically, there are certain points that if I was doing a graph of that timeline, I would point out. You know, you got like X-Men 1, Jim Lee, New X-Men, Astonishing, I'd probably throw on there. But honestly, you don't get anything between Astonishing until you get to House and Powers, honestly.
Yeah, in terms of like the real, you know, impactful stuff. Yeah, I agree with that. House and Powers introduce you to 2 critical concepts that the bulk of both series are built around solidifying. And I think that, you know, they needed to be built around these 2 concepts because these were the things that were going to be the hardest for us to accept and understand as readers. And they would also really carry the line throughout the entirety of the line, pretty much. So the first one is that Moira McTaggart is a mutant whose power is when she dies, it resets the timeline and sets her back to her mother's womb, knowledge of the life that she lived fully intact. The second is that mutants have cracked the code to at-will resurrection through the combination of 5 different mutant power sets, essentially eliminating death. That's major. That is huge. Let's tackle the first one first. Moira is a character who was a human ally to the mutants since she was created. You know, she was critical. You know, so of course, she's the mother of Proteus, you know, has a love with Professor Xavier. You know, she notably does create a mutant cure at some point. She gets the legacy virus at some point, which was a part of the impetus for using her in this position, because the legacy virus is notably only supposed to affect mutants, but it affected her. And at the time, the idea on Claremont's part was, you know, similar to like the AIDS virus. Like this doesn't just affect gay people. Straight people can also get this. Well, that applied to mutants. The legacy virus was for mutants, but humans can get it as well. Hickman said, "Hey, that's really smart and I love that, but actually it happened because she was a mutant on the low."
On the low is a good choice of words there.
Unintentional. I loved that concept from the beginning.
Yeah.
That concept could be very confusing. And, you know, we'll get to it. It eventually became confusing outside of Hickman's hands, I feel. But I think with Hickman's hands, he really towed the line there to make it straightforward as possible, but still be very high sci-fi.
Well, and on its face, like I think when you take the extra stuff away from it, I think it is a brilliant character reinvention that breathed life into a character that was really ancillary. You know, she's not just an X-Men side character, she's a Professor X side character who's almost an X-Men side character. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
The X-Men is the team, and like it or not, I don't. Most of the X-Men drama focuses on Jean, right? Like, so Professor X is like over here. He's never in the action, but he's got his own cast, and so Moira's over here, and it just like it's such a fascinating character reinvention for a character that, you know, if you don't know the name or her significance, even from the animated series, it's fresh and it is wildly invigorating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of retcons in our day. I think, you know, it's hard to argue that this isn't one of the most successful ones ever done. I would put it up there. I mean, it's not going to stand the test of time. As a character, she won't stand the test of time like someone like, let's say, Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
But in terms of the impact that it had, right up there. Certainly. Has to be. There's something special and bold about House and Powers. Even when you're reading, like I did my reread over the last week of some of this stuff. And the Moira centric issues really are incredibly stellar, and they hammer home the plight of mutant kind through the lens of someone to whom being a mutant is not anything to be proud of or happy about. Under Hickman, Moira is presented as a person who would really have preferred to have lived and died the simple, average life she had the first time around. You know, the book tells you that she dies at 71 to congestive heart failure, you know, and she has all these kids and grandkids, and she had a happy life. And her torture begins when she wakes up in her mother's womb and is like, whoa, what is this?
Funny, that's what happened when I woke up in my mother's womb too. That's when my torture began.
And it never stops.
Yeah, never stops.
Cale's still dealing with it today.
What life are you on, Cale?
Ugh. 48.
And her first instinct after she realizes her situation is to develop a cure for mutant kind. And she's only dissuaded from that due to the threat of destiny. We're very clearly shown that she tries everything, all possible allegiances, to figure out how to stop mutants from being on the losing end of things forever. She has no moral boundaries at all. She's also frustrated with the fact that she has to throw in with Charles and Magneto in order to have a shot at success. Two men she knows deeply. She knows all their strengths and all their flaws.
And over the course of different scenarios now as well, she has all that. And something interesting you said going back was that cure piece, I think also plays into the retcon, because now it's no longer a cure for mutantdom in general, but for herself, of that. So the added layer of elevating Moira continues through the progression of time as well.
And I also like how that also elevates Moira to Magneto Xavier territory.
Right.
Because those two, it's typically a boys' club. Those two are always bickering, just kiss already. But adding a woman to that adds a newer layer and dimension, which then Magneto and Xavier benefit from at the beginning.
It also her struggle also adds a layer both in the character framework, but also in that dichotomy, in that she knows she has this power, but nobody else does. You know, Xavier eventually does, but like if she didn't want to tell anybody, they wouldn't.
Mhm.
And the fact that she doesn't want it and goes to make a cure shows her opinion of mutants.
And adding her to a binary, Charles and Magneto, adds more gray to the whole debate on mutants. It was black and white, sort of, and now you add a third in, and it's not so much black and white anymore.
Yeah. Just incredible, incredible stuff. For Moira, the events of this life, her 10th life, are critically important. This is her last chance to get things right, according to Destiny, which that scene is still unbelievably good. The scene in Moira's, I believe it's her second life, where she creates the mutant cure and Mystique, Destiny, and Pyro go to her and they kill everybody that's there. And then they have a little chat with Moira where Destiny tells her, hey, you are betraying your own people. And maybe that doesn't matter to you. But I'm here to tell you that all these lives you think you're going to have, you won't. You're going to have 10, 11 if you do some things right. But every time that you try to figure out a cure for mutants or in any way try to impede the progress of mutants, I'm going to come for you. I'm older than you. My mutant power will activate before yours. I will see you and I will kill you. And even in that scene, which fascinates me, this is how far ahead Hickman was thinking. Even in that scene, Moira doesn't say, okay, shit, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do the right thing. She's asked, are you going to continue to pursue this path? And Moira says, I don't know. And Destiny says, okay, let's find out.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to kill you.
And they burn her to a crisp.
That's right.
Mutants burned her alive. They killed her.
Can't imagine why she'd want to cure him.
Exactly. We'll talk a lot more about Moira a little later. Let's talk about the other monumental thing that House and Powers did. The resurrection angle. Eliminating death. Death is obviously the enemy of all people. But it comes quickest and most and is on the backs of mutants. Mutants are hunted and killed for who they are. And House and Powers does a tremendous job of putting in your face the tally. It's not just how you feel. It's not just what you see. It's the facts. It's the 16 million plus that were killed by Scarlet Witch, depowering them, by what happens on Genosha in New X-Men. You know, it's all these things. It's Stryker, it's Trask, it's the Sentinels that kill mutants. And so Hickman had the brilliant idea to say, let's take that off the table.
Mm-hmm. Remove the mindset.
Yeah.
Quickly, Tom Account, thank you so much for the super chat. Hoxpox was the windshield in the industry of bugs. I was convinced Marvel had the formula to destroy competition. I look forward to your analysis as to why that didn't work out. Great show as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Hound.
To that resurrection angle, I think one of the other things that Hickman does really well is he works in this high sci-fi. And to be able to take a concept of, oh, let's simply treat this as like organic computation. You are taking whatever your memories, uploading it somehow into as data backed up by Xavier. You have the biology that's easy enough to like create, gestate something, and then you connect the pieces. That was just that concept alone feels mind blowing, and I think, I mean, Hickman gets credit for that, but the inventiveness of that and how it plays into the rest of how Krakoa plays out is incredible. Because then there's always threats, right? It also counters Moira's living through lives as well. Sure, they're contained within the lives, but the idea of resurrection starts with Moira and continues through even through Sinister.
Yes, exactly. A lot of the concepts sort of like echo each other.
One of the things too I like about the whole resurrection engine is that it also introduces the idea of a mutant circuit, which is it stems from the fastball special, which I think they said was the first circuit, which is Colossus throwing Wolverine, using your powers in a way to do something that neither of you could have done alone. And I thought that was genius, and that gets used constantly throughout the Krakoan age, which I hope continues on because it only makes sense.
That was brilliant. Yeah. Like you could easily, he could have, fudged with it and created a mutant who could just resurrect at will or something like that. But basing it in the powers that the characters already had and fudging things a little bit, like with Egg, Gold Balls,
Oh yeah.
that those were eggs and whatever. Like, okay, but he reaches a place, Hickman does, where for me at least, I wasn't sitting around going, wait, this doesn't make any sense. I was going, why didn't someone think to have mutants put their powers together sooner and see what that could build and what that could make? The first time that we see mutants die in House of Powers is during the mission that they go on to that Orchis installation in space, where they have to stop Mother Mold from coming online. Still to this day, I think that's one of the best singular issues of X-Men comics ever produced. And watching those characters die, they fail the mission and they die. It still gets me every single time. Every time. Because it plays on how much you care about these characters. And you don't know yet that they're going to be resurrected. So it's kind of like, whoa, what the fuck is this? How is Hickman going to walk this back? And that's the twist.
And then he does. And he walks it forward. He pushes past it.
Exactly.
So cool. So cool. Good, because it's also, it plays on, I think, the expectation of comics. Oh, surely these heroes will not die in this situation. They will prevail. They utterly fail and their lives are lost. Wait, people don't die in comics. He's like, hey, you're right, but this is why.
Exactly. What are the standout moments for you guys from Krakoa or from House and Powers?
The one that always jumps out to me is Xavier's new costume, and is it Cerebro? It's a Cerebro helmet, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that being like a question mark, especially with the maker around at the time, and that was a Hickman thing. I liked the debate around that. It lasted for a while too, and then we just kind of gave up on it. We're like, all right, no, this is who he is.
Some of you gave up on it.
You're still a truther?
Some of us aren't a coward. The one I think about a lot is one, the park bench conversation between Moira and Xavier, where she reveals her plan and her whole business. And that I think about a lot because of where we are now, I think. But I also think a lot about like the end of the, you know, the technarchy and the furthest reaches of what they were, what Hickman was doing in Powers, because Logan was the last one to survive with Moira. I just thought that was really interesting. He, you know, the one that's the emblem of the X-Men is the one that survives.
And the one most known for his ability to uh live forever, you know.
Adapt.
Yeah, and adapt, yeah.
I think the best moment for me was Apocalypse taking a new name, and it uh it being
That didn't happen in House and Powers.
oh, did it not?
No.
Dang. Well, in that case, Magneto's new costume. I like his colors.
Don't think there were any new. Those
Yeah,
were
no, that
old
was-
Magneto costumes.
Yeah, that was his
Was he
solo
not
series.
like in like the greens and stuff? And
Didn't wear that in House and Powers.
God damn it!
Fake fan.
Means.
For me, there were quite a few. I'll just run through some quickly. Chat, if you guys have a relationship with House and Powers, please share your standout moments as well. Like, I want this to be, you know, a conversation between us as well. Obviously, that initial discussion between Moira, Destiny, and Mystique still chilling. You know, Hickman is a master of dialogue. He often gets credited as the big plotter, and he is a tremendous plotter and planner, but I think his dialogue is just as strong. Go ahead.
Pete Collins actually brings up a good one. Seeing the ceremony and unity in the first resurrection scene hit hard for me. It really establishes a sense that this isn't a team but a community. And I remember that one because they all come out naked in front of the cradle. And like Nightcrawler's head is blocking Jean's naked body, and I know Sean was like, "Yo, Nightcrawler's fucking move."
It's not like that, man. It's not like that. No, yeah, Pete, that is a great one. That scene has a quality to it where it's just it's like we never thought of the X-Men as religious is not the right word that I'm looking for. There's like a spiritual, like an ascendant quality to that whole sequence that gives it a power that I just never really felt the X-Men as a collective ever had.
And if I remember correctly, it was during sunrise too, because you can see the sun coming down on them, just the way it was lit, which was like symbolic. Like, no, this is the rise of a new mutant nation in a way. I thought that was freaking gorgeous.
Exactly. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
CW Gordon says the no more splash after the first team death is it for me.
Yeah, dude. Go back and look at that shit, man.
Yeah.
Seriously. Adam Smith says, I agree, Sean. I'm not a big X-Men reader and only read Hox Pox, and it says something that the death scene stuck with me. Yes. Powerful. It was so powerful and impactful what Hickman and Co were able to accomplish there. The data pages. Those initial data pages are really good. The Sinister Secrets. Yeah, they're fun. And it's like it's a new element that wore out its welcome, but in those first issues in House and Powers and throughout the initial X-Men book, they work. They play. Dude, how many freaking times did we sit on this panel and go back and forth about the Sinister Secrets and trying to figure out what meant what and who was being referenced and shit?
Dissect it. Yeah, man.
Well, the pages felt like they mattered.
Yeah.
Felt like they laddered up into a thing, into a situation. Like even the breakdowns of Rasputin and the future Sinister line of mutants and stuff. Like,
Well,
it's cool.
The thing was that Hickman was doing them because that is how he can gather his thoughts. Like it is something he does. He is literally a graphic designer by trade. So it was a singular creative choice that I think worked because he was doing it.
Tom Muller was,
Sure,
very, very
sure, yeah.
much a part of that process. The ones that Hickman is credited with specifically are the ones after the deaths of the X-Men. So the No More and the all that stuff, Hickman is largely credited with that. A stroke of genius, I think, to include those data pages. Although, of course, like I said, it doesn't. They don't stay great.
They don't have the touch.
Yeah. Sabretooth being tossed in the pit.
Yeah.
Krakoa.
That's one of mine. Yeah. In the Krakoa, right in the Krakoa.
Is that the original sin of the Quiet Council?
Yeah, should be first one.
The
First,
text-
there was the first order.
The text tells you as much, at least by the end of Krakoa. That's what the characters believe. I'm not sure about that, but I think we agree Sinister is probably the original sin.
I do feel that way.
Which way? Sabretooth?
That Sinister was the original sin.
Not a mutant. What is he doing there? I guess it's like an enemies, keep your enemies close, friends closer, or the reverse, friends close, enemies closer.
Yeah, wasn't that like a tactical play? Because he also had genetic information, so they were using him, like co-opting him and his bank of information too.
Is he the original sin, or is he the snake?
Yeah, that's fair. He's the snake. And they felt they needed him. I guess for me, I feel like they probably could have figured out another way to not work with him. But who's to say that Apocalypse isn't the one that screws them over somehow?
Sure.
It could have gone anyway. So you're right. Yeah, he's more the snake. Were these, and by these I mean the decisions of the mutants, the decisions of Magneto and Professor Xavier, were these three right to take the radical steps they do to establish Krakoa? Was keeping the truth of Moira a secret the right decision?
I think from a tactical standpoint, yes, because if anyone knew that all they had to do was kill her and then this thing would be over, like it's a reset button, I understand why they kept that under wraps, underwater in a secret lair. Is it wrong? Yes. And I think maybe Xavier could have used his mind wipe powers to make it so that nobody really knew she was the solution. Like he could have Xaviered his way out of it. But I can see their thinking.
I wonder if there's a way to have done it without shoving her in a closet. She can be a part of it without having to reveal her entire thing,
But she couldn't exist because Destiny also existed. Because those were conflicting forces. So one of them had to be off the table, and I think in that situation they chose to keep Destiny, and Moira's tucked away because that way you don't reset things.
Destiny is dead at the beginning of House and Powers.
Yeah.
She's dead. Well, she's dead up until Inferno, actually.
Right.
And one of the specific things that Moira said was that Destiny could not be resurrected. That no precogs could be resurrected because they would be able to see her.
Yeah.
My opinion is that it wasn't wrong. I think that there are things that you have to do when you are trying to, build and protect a nation of marginalized people that might not be morally correct. I think you have to throw certain ideas out the window when you're doing this kind of thing. And the fact of the matter is that if anyone knew about Moira, it would cause a big problem. And it literally did right away. As soon as anyone knew that she was a part of this and her role, it created a massive problem. So to me, that only validates their whole point, which is that she could not be known. They faked her death and they took her off the board. And it was only through that they were able to make these things happen.
Right. And now remembering when they first tell Emma her reactions to it.
Yeah. I think that they didn't make a mistake at all through House and Powers. Sabretooth, I mean, I don't know. There has to be something you do with people like that, right?
And as we learn, Sabretooth is never sorry for the things he does. He's a power hungry maniac.
Exactly.
What do you do with that?
But they also throw other people in there. Like Toad was thrown in there. They threw Oye in there. The one from where she turned everyone into zombies. Not Celine, but she looks like Celine.
Not Madeline Pryor.
I forget, but they threw a couple people in there. That was the whole point of the Sabretooth one. It's like once they did Sabretooth, which made sense, then they had a prison, and that became something they would send people to for maybe things that maybe weren't as bad as Sabretooth. It became just an option. It's like underneath your bookshelf when you just need to you're trying to clean up. You're like, well, I do have a place I can just shove things under if I don't want to deal with it.
So revealing personal insight.
Check under the bookshelves.
Don't do it, please.
So the one last thing I wanted to talk about in the House and Powers era is the Crucible. This is the idea that, there are all these depowered mutants who have become human because they've lost what makes them mutants. Their mutant powers are not with them anymore. But they can get them back through resurrection. They just have to die first. And they would battle Apocalypse in this, this arena, this forum. And if they were true, if they fought, if they endured, then they would be resurrected with their destiny intact, their mutantdom intact. A lot of people, fans, and I think it's addressed in story as well, had problems with this. Problems and questions. Should mutants just be wantonly killing other mutants in this way? What kind of message does this send? The New Mutants book deals with that. There's a few conversations that deal with this. There's an issue of X-Men 7, that also gets into this in a big way. But it was the controversy and it was also the questions. So if you resurrect a mutant, what are you bringing back? Do they have a soul? Is it the same person or is it a copy?
Right.
I think the books are pretty explicit that it is the person and that they are getting their soul back.
Yeah.
The
body's just a shell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it isn't like Proteus's whole power reality manipulation too. So technically, they keep bringing a soul back as well. It's part of reality.
This is what Hickman said on that. But if that's the case, then what about duplicate copies? Which one gets the soul? I don't know. That sounds like a story to me, but that's also why you're not allowing copies of characters on Krakoa. But what if there's a mistake and you think someone's dead, but make a copy anyway? Well, again, that sounds like a story, and we even have a series built around resurrection problems coming out next year. Of course, that never would happen. The broader point is we bring back characters all the time in much less elegant ways, and this one is actually based on an experience Professor X had in earlier X-Men comics, so it makes sense he would think of something like this. He knew it worked. As for the reason it seems creepy, well, it feels that way because we did all the resurrections at the same time and presented it as ceremonial. It feels religious. It feels other. It feels terrifying. unless you're them, and then it feels ascendant.
But I don't think that's wrong. I think coming back from the dead should feel that way.
Agreed.
You're being born again. It's that newborn feeling, and I think they take that literally, and that makes it goes beyond the metaphor for the mutants. Now they become that for me also helps solidify some of the tribalism that was being felt in Krakoa.
Well, then I think back at like just right before Krakoa, you know, Scott Summers, you know, Cyclops was dead after Inhumans versus X-Men. And in the Rosenberg era, you flip a page and then Cyclops is at a bar and he says hello. It was like, it was a shock, but it was like, all right, what are we doing? This was only a year ago.
Yeah.
When you were teeing that up, Sean, I mean, I started to get the same kind of feelings that I did when I was reading it, of just like there's this kind of like rumbling and giddiness, but also kind of like an excitement for the mutants on their behalf, because there's this culture that's being built around it. And I think that was very much what Krakoa was about, was pushing the culture of mutants, not their situation and not the individual characters, but what is the collective experience of them mean for the larger Marvel universe.
Exactly. And I think the book isn't as concerned with what it means for the overall Marvel universe, but that's definitely a factor. You know, of course, we see Orchis rise up to oppose mutant kind, and we're going to talk more about Orchis because they're obviously a huge piece of this. But you know, there's also the great scene with the Fantastic Four where they capture Sabretooth, and Cyclops comes and he's like, "Hey, you got to give him over. He has amnesty. He's under mutant law now, not human law." And they don't really want to do that. And he's like, "Okay, we'll do this. We'll settle this another way down the road. And remind your son he has a home with us, Franklin Richards."
Yeah. That thread is still wild, dude.
But Hickman wrote those characters so well too. So it was like Hickman kind of going home a little bit, which I loved. I thought that was a great bit.
Yeah. Yep. So obviously Hoxpox releases and it's a success. It's a smash hit. People really gravitated toward it. The conversation in comics was really all about this at that time. This was the biggest thing going. But the numbers on Hox #1 were actually not as strong as Marvel thought they would be. In fact, it didn't sell as well as the Matthew Rosenberg penned X-Men 600, which had come out earlier that year. A lot of people believe that the reason for the softer sales, and when I say soft, I mean these books were selling great for comics. They were in the hundreds of 100,000 plus, but they just weren't doing the numbers that Marvel thought they would do. And so a lot of people believe that's because Marvel had sold us a hill of beans countless times about the next big thing in the X-Men, and we were kind of tired of that. So people needed to see it play out a little bit. But that actually had a negative effect on the line right away. Initially, the plan for X-Men was that it would be a launching pad for various books. Issue of X-Men, new #1. That was the original plan. I'll refer to Hickman. Quote, "A big thing I really regret not getting to try was how we wanted to execute the launch of the entire line. My initial idea was to use the X-Men title as a springboard for other books. So X-Men #1 would have been about the Hellfire Trading Company, and then we would have launched Marauders 2 weeks later. Then 2 weeks after Marauders, and because of the complications introduced in that story, X-Men 2 would have been about the need for a mutant CIA, and then we would have launched X-Force 1 2 weeks after that, and on for the entire line. The thinking behind this was, sure, #1 issues are really, really tricky, and this would be a cool cheat code for that, but these new titles had even heavier lifting to do than normal because they were introducing concepts, characters, and themes against a backdrop that unfamiliarized familiar titles. Those plans changed for a lot of good reasons, including bandwidth and time, but it's definitely an experiment that we need to do at some point because I think it might be a super effective way to launch an entire line in a really streamlined manner." You can kind of tell, not necessarily that, but you can feel that there were a lot of seeds being planted in the initial X-Men series that don't all get followed up in meaningful ways. But that book is really kind of like an anthology series.
Yep. A lot of standalone issues. Like I remember those by issues a lot of the time. So
Yeah. I love the. Go ahead, Tyler.
I was gonna say we know some of the books that like were teased in that, or at least brought up, but they just never materialized, right?
There was supposed to be an Imperial Guard book.
Oh God,
That
I
Hickman
would have
was gonna
killed
write.
for that.
Yep. It
That
was
would
gonna.
have been nuts.
Yeah, that was gonna be really cool. It was gonna be a 10-issue series that we just never got.
And wasn't like Sunspot eventually going to be like the king of the Shi'ar or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, that is that doesn't happen. I don't think, but it's heavily teased.
He and Deathbird are together.
Yes. Yes.
So there is kind of a royal relationship going. God, I love Deathbird.
Yeah. Yep. What are your reflections, if you have any, on that initial X-Men run?
Apocalypse in the Suit. That whole geopolitical issue. Is it 5 or 7?
4.
4. Okay, it's one of those numbers. Man, that was good. It just it made like Apocalypse the third of the triumvirate.
Yeah.
And like to be honest, like outside of like the animated series and X-Men Legends: Rise of Apocalypse, I had not read too many Apocalypse stories as an X-Men fan. And that was like, oh no, I think I understand the character just from this. It was a great, it synthesized the character for me and made me love Apocalypse, even though I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cale.
I was just gonna say the one that and stop me if we're not talking about this yet, but Marauders is what sort of stands out to me in just like a promise that didn't come through. You know, and it was kind of the first one for me. It's just that, you know, because there was a whole mystery around Kate Pride and what she wanted to do for that to come out is just you guys thought about it too much.
Oh, the gate, her being
Her
able to,
her powers negating the gate or whatever.
Yeah, the story didn't come through because neither could Kitty through the gates. So,
The vault and like the secrets of that I thought were really cool. You know, like what is that potential? How does, especially since that was teased in Hoxpox, like how did the genetics of this work out? And again, he's playing with that like grounded hard science, and that stuff is really cool. You know, it doesn't happen, like true evolution doesn't happen over the course of generations or over the course of a couple hundred years, but that stretch of thousands that can be accelerated in a small time frame. Oh, for sure, I get it. Was the I'm trying to think, was that sync issue, was that an X-Men?
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, heartbreaking, so good.
Yeah.
Man, Marco, I reread those issues and they hit so hard. Sync, X-23 Wolverine, and Darwin going into the vault knowing that they're not going to be able to get out easily and that they might lose their lives inside of there. Thousands of years will pass for them.
And go ahead, John, go ahead.
And seeing how Sync and Laura's relationship progresses, they grow old together. I mean, they grow super old together. And Sync talks about how all the concepts we have about I'll be with you forever and all these things, they're human language to reflect human life cycles.
Yeah.
But what does it mean when you tell another mutant who might live forever with you, I want to be with you forever? You know, what does that look like? And that's one of the things that I think the X line actually did do well was the relationship between Sync and Laura. That version of Laura, who would later go on to be known as Talon, she's super old, and he thinks that she's died in the vault, and he has to grieve the loss while he sees the X-23 that they resurrected is this young version that doesn't remember any of that.
Yep.
But then it turns out that Talon did not die, and she comes out of the vault. And now there are 2 X-23s. And that's the only time that happens in the Krakoan age, if I recall. where there's two of the same person.
And those were the resurrection issues that Hickman wanted to talk about.
Exactly.
And I think that's great.
And the only way that you even get the follow-up to all this is if you read X-Men by Jerry Duggan, because that's where he deals with Talon. That's where she comes back. That's where her and Synch get to have something together before she eventually dies, and they won't bring her back.
That explains why I didn't know about that.
And using Laura Kinney as that character is another great idea, because that is a character that deals with clones constantly and has that as a problem that she's had to get over. And this is almost like re-traumatizing again to go through it.
Criminal how Synch was so prominent and then just wasn't
even on the cover of X-Men 700.
Man, oh God. We're going to talk about the crimes of Krakoa a little bit later.
The Araco crocodile guy from X of Swords was on the cover, but not Synch. Deadpool was on there. Like,
and he's not a mutant. It's bullshit.
He's got a movie coming out. So
prominent Krakoan. He was there for the sales, remember?
Yeah. That was good. Rami with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Rami. Says, a question for later. If you're to summarize the Krakoan era for future readers, which events would you include? Yeah, we can tackle that a little bit later. Thank you. Cale, can you keep that in our back pocket, please?
You got it.
Thank you.
Which lore do you keep?
Which Laura do you keep?
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough question to answer, because as far as Synch was concerned, she was dead. So the resurrection protocols require that you resurrect the last backup. And because she was stuck in, Talon was stuck inside of the world, there was no way to back her up. So that's why when she's resurrected, she's young again. They couldn't keep Talon because they couldn't keep two of the same mutant at the same time. That breaks the rule. And we have no way of knowing the kind of problems that would have caused.
You go with you stick with the default or the backup
paradox. Yeah.
What wasn't it really the only other time where they brought up that resurrection paradox with Cable?
I don't really remember how all of that went.
I think it was young Cable died, and they weren't sure which version to bring back. Well,
but young Cable was the guy in the books. Was the guy that stuck around? I feel like I remember.
Initially, yeah, because he was around in Ten of Swords, which we'll get to,
right? Because
he had one of the swords. But older Cable does come back, I think, with Ewing's run and stuff.
Yes, he does. Yep. Let's answer a couple quick questions. AC Joe said, "How was the advertisement before Hoxpox? Was there a build up throughout the Marvel universe?" No, there was just literally like the Mark Brooks promo images, and that's it. We didn't really get anything until the books. There were like 5-7 page preview images from Initial House, without words attached and shit like that. But nothing inside the universe suggested anything about the future at all.
Yeah, we were seeing that whole initial like conversation and blank word balloons, I feel like.
Yeah. Pete Collins, Marauders was a great book with greater potential. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Aggressively relaxing on the Excalibur front. Excalibur was my favorite at the beginning because I was so impressed someone decided to make their comic about Psylocke's backstory and the King Arthur Marvel stuff that's playing the game on hard. Excalibur was my second favorite.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Books. Yeah.
Well, that was Teeny Howard, right?
Yeah,
sure was.
Real good stuff.
Yeah.
Mahmoud Asrar, I think, on art as well, or at least on covers.
Yeah, I think so. We should talk about the launch titles that we actually had in the Dawn of X. So it was X-Men. We know about that. Marauders. We talked about that. Excalibur was Marcus Toe. Actually, was the initial artist on that. New Mutants was Hickman and Ed Brisson. Rod Reese was on the art. That was a good book.
Hickman wasn't on it long though, right? Hickman was only on it for like 2 issues or something.
I think I want to say it was more than 2, but it was during New Mutants. Unfortunately, oh my God, this is so frustrating. It was during New Mutants when Hickman knew he had to leave. He had already figured out that he was going to have to leave. So that's why he stopped doing that book.
Because I know like Vita took over the book, and then like everyone was just kind of liking doing what they were doing.
We had X-Force. X-Force, of course, that was the only book to stand. Well, X-Force and Wolverine, the only two to stand the test of time and make it from issue 1 to 50. Fallen Angels, which we talked about. Brian Hill with Simon Kudransky on art. Wolverine, Ben Percy, Adam Kubert on that initial arc.
Yeah,
That
I
was
forgot
cool.
about that.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Good to see him. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yep. Cable, Jerry Duggan with Phil Noto. Hellions with Zeb Wells with Steven Segovia on art. And X Factor, Leah Williams, David Baldione. That was the initial Dawn of X lineup. Well, some of those books came a little bit later, but that was the initial lineup. From November to September, those were the books that we got.
I mean, if we're considering Hellions part of that, because I think that was one of the later ones. Hellions was a standout for me. That it was Zeb Wells coming back to Marvel in a long time. Like I haven't seen him since writing some like Avengers and like Spider-Man stuff way back when. And it was like all the ragtag weirdos and villains, and them being in a book led by like Quanon Psylocke, post Fallen Angels, because that book had already finished by that point. Fantastic book. Highly recommend anyone pick it up.
So, before we move on to 10 of Swords, I did want to just linger on X-Men proper just a little bit longer. So some of my reflections from that particular book were the ways in which it tells the Orchis story. Orchis is the group of humans that have assembled as a countermeasure to what mutants are doing. And it was a group that already had seeds planted, not in the books, but the idea that if mutants ever reach a certain point, we have to activate the Orchis protocols. And they pulled from ex-Shield members, Hydra members, Hammer, all these different groups to create Orchis, all these brilliant scientists and everything else. And of course, humans don't really have a means of fighting mutants. So they pulled from what they know. They pulled from technology. They pulled from machines. Those are the things that stand most at opposition to mutant kind. The Sentinel. That is the prime hunter of mutants, is the Sentinel. So how do we advance that? How do we make it bigger? Well, House and Power suggests that the apex predator of mutant kind is Nimrod, the Super Sentinel. That's not a new concept. That goes all the way back to the 90s. Nimrod being this apex predator. Hickman took that and brought it into the forefront. Powers of 10 suggests that Nimrod is always there. And that his activation point is what leads to mutants losing always. So they thought they stopped it. Turns out they didn't, because in X-Men we see the birth of Nimrod. Aaliyah Gregor, one of the leaders of Orchis, creates Nimrod due to the grief she's suffering because of the death of her husband, Erasmus. And she takes his... I'm sorry?
Erasmus.
She takes his essence and puts it into Nimrod. I didn't remember all that.
That's her whole conflict, and I think I don't think I forgot, but I was reminded of it in the conversation she has with Cyclops. At the end, I think in the Jerry Duggan book.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the fact that Hickman found a way to tether some like real emotion to Orchis and make us sort of care about their plight too was a stroke of brilliance, especially because at this point there were still a lot of people who weren't sure the X-Men were the heroes in this story. And so the moment where Nimrod sacrifices, so the Nimrod that is Erasmus sacrifices itself to protect Orchis from a bomb that Mystique plants on their stronghold. And from that point forward, Nimrod is no longer her husband, and it breaks her heart. But think about what she did. She took the essence of a person and she put it into a husk. That's the exact same thing that the mutants do.
Yeah. Yeah. The only difference is the shell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it shows you just how close mutants and humans really are. That's how close they are. When one expands, the other expands.
It's coevolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's something that doesn't get addressed all the time. And I think was interesting here was that they're growing together because that's how evolution works. As one species adapts over the course of time, so does the other, not in necessarily in turn or in like, but in response. And so you end up with this cycle, and that's what ends up marking the 13 lives of Moira too. She just keeps coming back because they keep growing together, regardless of how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously in real life that happens on a scale of, you know,
Millions of years.
exactly. But in the comics, because mutants represent such a jump forward, you know, it necessitates a similar aggressive expansion on the part of humanity. And what are humans if not adaptable?
And your Patreon contribution actually helps fund my next husk, so we can upload me to the system.
I don't co-sign that.
Me neither. The Brett Booth issue, the Brett Booth appearance during X-Men.
That's a great issue. Yeah, that was a great issue. Is that 25?
Doesn't actually get all that high. It gets only to 21.
Okay.
But it's I don't remember the exact number. I'm sorry.
It was after
It's up
something
there.
big. Yeah, I remember that. It was right after something big, and we were like, "Oh, is that it?" But it was cool.
Hell
was
yeah.
was that one of the giant sized?
No.
No,
Was he not on also a giant sized?
I don't think so. I think it was issue 17 actually that he did.
Maybe it was after the vault.
I think it
Stuff.
was. The vault was like 15, maybe.
Nah, so the vault is two issues. It's 5 and 18.
18.
And then 17 is the one that Booth does. It's after 10 of Swords, actually. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go, please.
I was gonna pivot to something else. I also wanted to bring up that issue with, is it Vulcan?
The Summer House issue, yeah.
Of X-Men and the Summer House. And it was like, other than Nightcrawler's first, instinct of like, okay, we've got to make a new religion. Our other thing should be to make more mutants. And that really kicked off this whole thing of like, oh, these dudes horny. and that was like the first, I feel like that was the first time we really got to see like they just going at it all the time.
I mean, that was the issue. We got the layout of the house with the open doorways for Jean, Wolverine, and Cyclops' rooms.
Issue 1, by the way.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah,
really?
I have the cover on the stream.
Wasn't after the Crucible? Wasn't there like a giant orgy or something? Like a big party at the end?
There was constantly orgies, dude. He had a tiki bar there too. It was like the pregame spot.
I don't know if it was explicitly stated that there was any orgy, but I think we can all, make some assumptions.
Hey, it's not on the page. It's not.
Brevoort would deny it.
Brevoort says no.
A bit like in the Matrix, something crazy happens, so they have a big party. The party is the orgy.
Right. Yeah, totally. There were so many big ideas introduced constantly, guys, like nonstop. It's hard for us to even address them all because there were just so many things being done. Hickman was working hard to establish concepts and just put stuff out there that the other writers would take and then play with. Like, make more mutants. Well, how does that affect Rogue and Gambit? Rogue can't be touched by other people.
Couldn't Gambit just wear a? Never mind. Do you think that is a negative as well? That too many Hickman ideas were introduced so quickly that it was guaranteed that not all of them would be picked up.
I don't think it necessitates needing to pick up. I think the ones that have probably the legs to go the distance, then sure. But if not, like I'm pretty sure the make more mutants angle could just be something societal and doesn't necessarily have to play out in the books. Like there's actually a question in the chat from Chad, like, so were there any actual births? And you could address that, but I don't know that it necessitates needing, like, I don't need to know that. It'd be interesting because it adds color to the culture. And realistically, I don't know if there were. I remember there being young kids, like the kids being in, there's that issue of Apocalypse where he's just kind of like telling the story of something to these young mutants, but I don't recall any actual like births or mentions of that.
Even in New Mutants, it was a lot of saving young mutants.
Right.
I feel like there was an issue of one of Spurrier's books. There was like a nursery or something.
Yeah.
Way of X, with
So there must have been births. We just, they weren't on the page, so I guess they didn't happen.
Yeah, there was never celebrated as new mutant births, which that's a good point, Marco. As you'd think that would be a big deal.
Right.
But I guess, can you have a new mutant birth when it activates later on?
Well, but then that very much becomes a situation of just like, this is the first mutant born on Krakoa, like the new paradise. That you would think that'd be something. So maybe there's something to your point, Tyler. Like, that you could address it. You don't have to though.
Sure. Yep.
So Hickman has talked about this in some way. There was a segment of the audience that was frustrated by the Make More Mutants law because they felt that it excludes people in non-heterosexual relationships, and because obvious, right? And so Hickman said, "Hey, I never said that the only way to make more mutants is to produce them through sex. There are just as there are people in this world who can have children in other ways, the mutants are the same. And also, making more mutants doesn't necessitate that anyone is born. Just bringing mutants back through the crucible is a way. Resurrecting dead mutants who have been dead for however long is a way. So there were multiple ways to make more mutants that didn't only mean reproduction."
And I think of New Mutants when Cosima was activated. Her mutant gene was activated, and the New Mutants were deployed to her to bring her to Krakoa. Because that's really the only way you can get a new mutant. They're not born as mutants, as I like. Even if two mutants procreate, it's not necessarily a mutant right away.
It's not a guarantee. Their mutant power wouldn't manifest until they were a young
exactly.
teen,
yeah.
Mostly anyway. So yeah.
So I guess like the activation is the birth, really, because that's mutantdom in a way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You asked a question if they introduce too many concepts too soon. Personally, I don't think so. I think that it needed to feel full. And I think that, had Hickman stayed on, I would imagine that largely things would have been, handled. But he didn't. So.
And it's surprising to hear, I don't know, maybe not surprising, but it's surprising to hear that he knew so early that he would have to leave. Like, I wonder if he just felt it.
Yeah, we're gonna get deep into that in a couple of segments. You guys ready to talk Ten of Swords? Are you ready to move on, or should we hang in this phase for a little while?
Damn, I don't know. Should we follow the publishing line or what?
Let's let Sean go ahead, and we'll stay here. We like what we're doing.
Right. That's right. So, Way of X.
Well, okay. So, Ten of Swords was the first event inside of the Krakoan age, and it happened in 2020, I believe, or maybe it was 2021.
I think it was 2020.
Yeah, it was 20. Yeah,
Yeah, because 2019 would have been
was
X-Men, and then yeah.
it was 20. And it for me personally, it was the first time that I really started to question what is going on here. Because we did have, we had COVID, we had the lockdown, and things shut down, and new comics weren't being published. And so what it created was it created an opportunity for the X line to really dig in on this story. Initially, Ten of Swords was supposed to play out only in July of 2020. But it got so big due to all of the time that the creators had to just sit with it and think about it that they expanded it and added more and more ideas to the equation and things like that, to the point where Ten of Swords ended up being over 20 issues long. It was a very long story that played out throughout all the different X-Men books at the time, and then also had 3 single issue stories, one in the beginning, one in the middle, and one in the end. Creation, Stasis, and Destruction, I believe, were the 3.
Yeah.
And it was this weird gimmick where the mutants had these swords and they were in a tournament in Otherworld with Saturnine, and they had to fight the Araco mutants and stuff like that. Saturnine being, my God, my heart. That's where we started to see the half gloves and, oh my, please, Russell Dauterman. Oh my God.
Sean wanted Saturnine to pull a Ultimates Hank Pym on him.
Oof. They said she was like, what did they say she was? They said she was like 8 feet tall.
9
and
feet tall, yeah.
She could get as big as she wanted. Yeah.
Depended on who was drawing that woman, please put her in front of me.
I will say, though, her and Emma being prominent characters in Ten of Swords was confusing.
I was in heaven.
Yeah.
Sean was just like, every issue, Sean was just be like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
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 It's that Doomsday Clock panel with Superman and Giganta.
Yeah, I remember that. Before we dig too deeply in on Ten of Swords, let me just say to all 50 of you that are hanging out with us live right now at this moment, thank you. Thank you. We have so much to talk about. Please keep sharing your reflections of this era of X-Men comics. This is our opportunity to really dig in. There's a lot of bad. We've been talking about the bad over the last few years on Pals Polls and whatnot, but we're still in the era of great comics. And, I've done a lot of reflecting on this stuff. So please share your reflections with us. Hit the like button, smash it. Subscribe if you're not. We're on the road to 3K. We just hit 2,600 the other day. Thank you guys for that. Keep it coming. Keep it coming.
I actually want to do one quick shout out.
Yeah.
Aaron Ruiz, who's been with us for quite a while now, says, "Nice, I got to meet the pals because of Inferno. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but 2021, so Krakoa is the top 3 eras of X-Men immediately." He follows up, I got the 4 issues weekly, got really excited about it, so looked up reviews for issue 4, and then you guys popped up. Thank you for hanging out, man.
We were so young.
Our good brother Atomic Hound says, "Do you have your Ten of Swords omnibus, Sean?" Well,
funny you bring that up.
You should know. You should know I got this bad boy. I keep this thing on me.
Oh yeah, still wrapped too.
Still wrapped, pristine.
And wrapped.
It's wrapped because Sean's such a big fan. He wants to keep it in pristine condition.
No. Ten of Swords was very frustrating. The Hickman issues felt really good. They had the weight, the gravity. We got Genesis out of this story. Genesis being one of the better characters, I think, that was a new character in the Krakoan age. We got Bay,
She was Bay.
Yeah, that was Doug's girlfriend. That was awesome. We got Iska the Unbeaten, who was awesome. We got some really cool characters out of it. But a lot of times, the way that those stories during the Ten of Swords era were being told was frustrating. They felt superfluous, and they necessitated that you read books that you weren't otherwise reading. It was a real crossover, which crossovers are okay, but in modern Marvel comics, they've largely steered away from crossovers. Normally, we would get self-contained events. And so this was frustrating for a lot of people, including me. And it felt like a deviation. That was the biggest point of frustration, I think, was that it felt like it was deviating from what the story had been, even though it was all being seeded. It just was like, wait, do we really care about this other island of mutants? Like, is this really something we need to spend this much time with?
It felt like secondary to the main story, like you're saying, and I think it's the first time where we started to feel, or maybe I felt, okay, these elements of the story are starting to get convoluted. There was a lot to deal with, and we were still dealing with repercussions of a lot of Hoxpox, X-Men, all of the Dawn of X things, and this gets added on top of those things. So it felt like, too much to handle all in one, and maybe it was getting unruly at that point. And by then we had a couple issues of certain books where we were able to tell, maybe I'm not feeling this one, maybe I'm not feeling this one. So it gives me the opportunity to fall off, and then this forced me to have to hop back onto some of those that I was otherwise not interested in.
I was real frustrated with the way it was released and how it was in every book, and you had to read that. Like, you'd read the Wolverine issues, and like, this is just a Wolverine story, but it's being told that it's part of this bigger story because there's these almost AVX style 1v1 sword competitions between these characters. Like, sure, it gave me Pog as a cool character, but like, I thought it was just a bit. It was classic X-Men in the way that it was crossing over between each book, but I thought we had grown past that.
But even some of that would have been okay, but like we said, there was a dinner. There were 2 dinner issues, where the X-Men and the members of the tournament went and had a dinner at Saturnine's castle, and it was just like, well, why do we need this? Like, let's get to it. And that's where, to me, we really started to see the gears grind, and we started suffering from that.
And that was like 3 issues, right? Like,
yeah,
of that, because it happened across different books, and effectively, I could have sworn 2 of those issues almost exactly mimicked each other.
I think now's a good time to talk about the way that the X writers room, which isn't necessarily the accurate term for what it was, but that collective of creators, we should talk now about how they worked. So it was top down at first, because obviously Hickman had the initial idea for House and Powers. But once the other creators got into the fold, they started to add their ideas to the mix. And according to Jordan White and many of the other creators involved, they have talked about how willing to collaborate he was. Hickman has talked about his history. He grew up playing sports. He was used to being on teams. He likes working with people. He loves the collaborative process of comics. That's why the 3 World, 3 Moons thing is happening on his Substack. That's the kind of thing that he's into. It's almost like being in a band. You bring yourself to the band, but there's no band that's one person. There's no band that the person who's playing the guitar also plays the drums and also writes the music and also writes the lyrics. Like, that's not really how bands work. Tyler's shaking his head. I don't know what that means.
I'm thinking of Tame Impala.
9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
But does Trent Reznor, like, does he write every single aspect of every single thing that they do?
Like, at some point, even with those bands you listed, like, at some point there are other people involved.
Sure.
For the live performances, yeah.
So they talk a lot about his ideas and how he was willing to be malleable. I'm going to quote from Jordan White right now about Ten of Swords. Part of the way that is proven out to be true is that the story you're going to see in Ten of Swords grows out of 2 places most of all. One is some of the stuff Hickman has been seeding since House of X, but the other part of it is teeny stuff in Excalibur. In a big way, both of those are a big part of it. So it does connect all the way back to things that Hickman was pitching from the beginning, but this specific thing wasn't. And then we'll do the Ten of Swords things. That definitely wouldn't have existed if all the other books hadn't come into play the way that they are. Jonathan is a big planner, but he's also a really good collaborator. He has not dictated to everybody what they are going to do. There have been places where he has had a strong opinion about what they're going to do, or has given suggestions about how they make what they make a million times better. But he didn't go, you do a book about this and you do a book about this. They all really brought their own ideas to it. And once they did, he incorporates those ideas into the larger design. So yeah, the book that is Ten of Swords would not have come to pass if most of all Teeny, but really the whole group hadn't come together and done what they were doing. So yeah.
So was it run like a quiet council? He just got
guess you could
outvoted?
say that.
Huh.
He gets outvoted a few times.
Yeah, it's always sort of sounded like the problem was the room needed a leader. You know, and while he was the showrunner or whatever, it sounds like he didn't like take on like the hard responsibilities of that title.
That's an interesting way to look at it. And I think that's accurate. I think Hickman really respects other people's creative processes. He talked a lot about this in podcasts that I heard, to the point where he won't pitch on books that currently have creative teams because he thinks it's disrespectful to try to take a book out from under someone. And at this time, you know, yeah, he's getting to jam and it's super fun with these creators, but it also means that they have jobs.
Yeah.
So if a book would be, if a book would come to its natural close, right, and Hickman feels, okay, it's time to move on from that idea, that would represent a job loss for the creative team involved with that title. So how do you deal with that? And if Teeny Howard is doing things in Excalibur that she's really excited about, do you not then integrate that into the larger story? What does that look like?
But should you, for the sake of the narrative, the complete narrative that he was putting forward, like I feel like there's an argument to be made there of, well, fine, you can play in this sandbox, and sure, but I ultimately need you to get to this spot. Even if you deviate, you have to sort of rubber band back for me for this larger through line. And to what Cale was saying about like him having to be able to manage that, that's part of his role as head of X. Is you guys can play in these things, but he also needs to be partially editing to make sure that the things that ultimately come back to him play out the way that he needs them to play out.
But I think that's the key, is that Hickman was so open to collaboration that almost from the moment that House and Powers resolved, it became a collective effort and not just his. And so, yeah, it's very obvious from the very beginning that there was going to be an Arakko piece, that was going to be dealt with in some way. The way to get there, what that would ultimately look like, was born out of the collaboration and born largely out of what Teeny was doing. It's hard to parse out, and everyone says this now, it's hard to parse out what was Hickman's original plan versus what wasn't, because his original plan was thrown out the window really fast. Like bits and pieces of it were thrown out really fast. So at this point, we are no longer operating strictly from his original plan.
Do you think in terms of editorial, that's the original sin? No distinct leadership and no real structure like a writer's room?
I think that's Hickman's original sin. I think he desperately needed to take control. And it's great and it's generous, but, you know, if his goal wasn't to create an era and tell a full story, maybe he shouldn't have taken it.
I think that's sort of where I come down on it as well, is, you know, I'm a huge fan of the new Avengers run that Hickman did. Arguably my favorite Marvel run ever. That was a singular vision. He did have who was it? Sam Humphries, or I forget the exact writer that he worked with on Avengers for a time.
I think you might be right on that. Yeah.
But that was largely just what he was doing. And yes, there were events that he had to intersect with here and there, Axis, Superior, Iron Man, he had to deal with some of that stuff. But what happened in the pages of his books was all what he wanted to do. So when we got to this, I thought, okay, yeah, there are other titles, right? Like there's Excalibur and stuff, but they're marching to the beat of Hickman's drum.
Right.
I didn't realize that wasn't the case. And it was here at Ten of Swords that it became clear that it wasn't like that.
Yep.
And that's when I think that things started to get a little wonky.
Yeah. Yeah, AC Joe says, if Marvel trusted Hickman so much, then why move away from his plan unless he told them not to use them because it's his ideas? Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about that piece right there that we'll dig into. Ultimately, Ten of Swords did not work for me largely. And you see my copy still in wrapper. I have every individual issue. I bought this shit in advance because I was so confident I was going to love it, and then I didn't.
Fire! It's gonna be fire! No, you guys are wrong. No, I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna do it live on stream. No, didn't you do it while we were recording?
Yeah,
I did.
Sean, never use your credit card while we're doing a show. That never works out for you. How's that Comixology subscription?
Fuck! I gotta get rid of that. Oh my god!
Don't. Remember we were talking about the Ninja Turtles? Use it for that. Use it for that. A lot of that's on Unlimited.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I won't because I hate
I know.
Comixology Unlimited. Unbelievable. Okay, so now we're on the Hellfire Gala Planet-Sized X-Men piece of this thing.
Remember our Hellfire Gala?
Yes.
Wow, that was fun.
Yes, we actually did our own Hellfire Galas. You can find those episodes in our backlog. I don't even know if they're still public, but they exist. And the other pals, other than me, dressed up for the occasion, just like the characters in the books did. And we had a blast. It was a lot of fun. The original Hellfire Gala wasn't actually a single issue. It played out across the multiple titles, a similar crossover to Ten of Swords, that when they still thought that concept worked. But the big to-do happened in Planet-Sized X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Which was when they terraformed Mars and made it into a home for the Araco mutants.
Amazing issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where the circuit comes into play again, because it made Nightcrawler, it made Storm and Iceman, these really if you those powers combined, Captain Planet style, they had their own huge moment. And the idea of terraforming Mars is so bonkers to me that it seems obvious, but not at the same time. I just thought it was so good. Who drew that? Do you remember?
So let's see.
I could look it up.
That was drawn by, I want to say, a lot of people.
Yeah, the galas were.
Yeah, that was drawn by a lot of individuals.
Planet-Sized specifically was written by Jerry Duggan and Pepe Larraz, it looks like.
Okay.
I feel like that was also where we, coming out of X of Swords, it got back into a groove. We're like, oh, cool. Okay, there's another, we got past the rockiness of having to deal with Araco, and now it's cool, forward progression again. There's good momentum. We're back into the groove. Hellfire Gala was awesome. The way it crossed over, it made sense because we also got some under the wraps kind of reveals as well, outside of just the terraforming of Mars. I feel like other factors were at play with Marauders even too, like, you know, some of the international business aspects of it. So it was cool because it played out in a different way.
And I think it almost justified at least the end of Ten of Swords. You know, introducing Araco and those mutants, and needing, because now there's almost twice as many mutants, needing to then level up on the global scale for people to see, was the next evolution for mutants. And I think it made sense in terms of major beats for mutants in the Krakoan era. And introduced us to some great characters on Araco once we got that whole planet going.
Yeah. And it was another indication that Marvel was allowing these creators to play for keeps. This was a huge advancement that meant that things were fundamentally different. Like, they literally changed Mars. So that planet is now off the table for other creators, because now that is Planet X.
We got the vote too, right? Like the first time using the vote to get the X-Men team, that was cool. And I think the Marvel IRL did a pretty good job of promoting that. You got other people outside of the books to be like, oh yeah, let's do this. I'm campaigning for this person, and that was fun. It was also just a good marketing scheme.
Who won that first vote? It was Firestar, right?
It was a bunch of people, because they recast not the entire team, but a lot of it.
Sure.
Firestar.
I have the whole team. Yeah, I wasn't sure who. Yeah, it's Firestar, Magic, Iceman, Havoc, Sync, Cyclops, Jean, and Forge.
Yeah, so
those are all voted, right?
Jean and Cyclops were the only ones that were already like on the team, if I remember correctly.
And it all felt tactical too, right? Like Sync being there, the fact that you had some of the other people play out you had your heavy hitters, people could fly. Is just a cool way to build a team that worked for the sake of what they were trying to do with the X-Men.
Also launched Jerry Duggan's X-Men.
Yeah.
Indeed, which was the handoff. That was the initial sign we should have taken that something was wrong, because why would Hickman not be writing X-Men? But yeah, Jerry Duggan got that job. During that same time frame, we also had stuff like X-Men Trial of Magneto, which the less said about that, the better. We also had
Magneto, wasn't that oh my god, wasn't that fucking Wanda and shit?
Yeah.
This is weird because at this point I was on the show now, having been a listener when you guys first started.
Right.
So the Krakoa had legs at this point.
For sure. The Way of X, the Onslaught stuff, all of that. And all that stuff for me felt not it. And it started to feel more and more like I needed to focus only on what Hickman was doing. Because a lot of the other stuff started to feel like it was just like, yo, what are we doing? Like, I don't care about this. You just spent all this time telling me why Wanda's a piece of shit, and now she's redeemed. What the Trial of Magneto has almost nothing to do with Magneto. Like, what are we doing here?
What was Hickman doing between that and Inferno? We were just waiting for Inferno? Was that it?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, X-Men, his time on X-Men came to a close with issue 21, which dropped that was November of 2020 that we lost that. And then I guess then it was Inferno. But this was when I started to really be like, okay, I don't know. Like, X Corp, I didn't like at all. Children of the Atom was very bizarre. I didn't understand why that needed to exist. There were just a lot of weird books at the time.
Children of the Atom was that one where they weren't even mutants, right? They were just cosplayers who only one of them wound up being an actual mutant.
Yeah. By the way, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. June 9th, 21 was the last issue of X-Men by Hickman.
Yeah, because I remember there being a half year of just nothing from him.
And those books felt like they were exploring the ancillary parts of the now Krakoan era, where I feel like we were still having issues with some of the books that were playing out even concurrently. Like, at the time, it's like, why are they adding these books when some of these other ones need a little, they need a tune up. They need to bring some life back into them.
Aaron Ruiz brings a good point. This is around the time of the Substack boom.
Yep.
Yep. Hickman already announced what's it, 3 Worlds, 1 Moon? What is it called?
3 Worlds, 3 Moons. Yeah.
Yeah. So his fingers were already in different pots at that point.
Well,
Muted Cale.
oh, on August 17th, 2021, Entertainment Weekly dropped their article with Jonathan Hickman, where he made the announcement that he would be leaving the X books. An announcement that shocked the entire comics sphere because we did not see this coming. He said, plans have changed entirely. When I pitched the story I wanted to do, I pitched a very big, very broad 3-act, 3-event narrative. The first of which was House of X. And while this loosely worked as a 3-year plan, I told Marvel up front that I honestly had no idea how long the first part would last because there were a lot of interesting ideas that I had seeded that other creators would want to play with. And so we left this rather open-ended. I was also pretty clear with all the other writers that came into the office what the initial 3-act plan was, so no one would be surprised when it was time for the line to pivot. However, I also knew that I was cooking with dynamite, and it was very possible that what I had written in House of X and the ideas contained within was not actually the first act of a 3-act story, but something that resonated more deeply and worked more like Giant-Sized X-Men, where it would represent a paradigm shift in the entire X-Men line for a prolonged period of time. So during the pandemic, when the time came for me to start pointing things toward writing the second act event, I asked everyone if they were ready for me to do that, and to a man, everyone wanted to stay in the first act. It was really interesting because I appreciated that House of X resonated with them to the extent that they didn't want it to end, but the reality was that I knew I would be leaving the line early. Marvel doesn't pay me to just write ongoing monthly books. There's an expectation for me to write bigger books that have a wider reach than that. In an effort to facilitate both things, we've also spent the last 6 months or so reorienting the line, me creating Inferno to assist with that, and then bringing in some new writers to add to the existing team, and then the plan for the next several years of X books. So after Inferno, I'll be leaving to go work on my next big Marvel thing, and starting in July, the X line will rocket forward, starting with a weekly series that leads into the very cool refocused line of books that is X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine. Yes, it has taken us a little while to get everything assembled correctly, but the end result, everything that's coming after Inferno, is going to be pretty great. Now, right? Now, the week before this announcement was made, Hickman announced 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. Do with that what you will.
Which does anything come of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a living story that's being told through his Substack, and they have released very, very limited physical books, and I think you can get even more if you're a part of the Substack, but that's where it lives and breathes.
Is it a comic?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I know nothing about it. That's on me though.
Yeah.
There's a few different writers attached and stuff. It's a whole universe.
I think Stephen Walker is the editor, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the same thing that he was trying to do with the X line without the X line. It's a jam session with other creators. They're building shit on the fly. I remember being devastated reading this announcement. I remember feeling duped. I was angry. The shit happened again. I've been a fan of Hickman's work for a very long time, and anybody who's been on that ride with me remembers what happened with Ultimate Comics Avengers, the Ultimates that Hickman worked on. He had set up something insanely exciting, and then he left it in the middle of it to go and work on mainline Avengers. He doesn't always get to finish what he starts. Look at his non-Big Two work. Some of that stuff never got to end.
Black Murder Monday.
And Hickman has talked a lot about this. He's talked a lot about the fact that he wasn't mad, that there were no hard feelings attached at all. I got a little bit more insight into the creative process at Marvel, at least for Hickman, throughout listening to some of his interviews. He talked about the fact that, Marvel doesn't really work like, okay, you're doing this, you're doing that, and that's all you're doing. It works like editors from different regions say to you, hey, Hickman, are you available for this? Can you handle doing this? And you have to say yes or no. Hickman could theoretically have worked on X-Men and Three Worlds, Three Moons and Gods and. But obviously he's one person. So in order to say yes to some things, he has to say no and goodbye to other things. And that is what happened. Hickman knew he had to do Gods. Hickman knew he wanted to do Three Worlds, Three Moons. He couldn't stay working in this X line because what they were asking for wasn't, hey, go away for a while. It was, let's stay in this phase. So what is Hickman going to do? Keep writing X-Men every month until they're ready to move on? He couldn't do that.
How long?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the plan. That's not his plan, right? So now you're messing up his narrative, his through line, his story. Damn, though. But I'm sure he's a smart guy. He could have figured something out. Keep him on X-Men. Just give me like till issue 40.
But that's the thing. That's what we were talking about earlier. Like, if he wanted to be, a real leader in that room, that's what he should have done. He should have said, no, absolutely not. We're moving on.
Triangle him.
Get on board or get off.
Damn. Cale's like, shit or get off the pot.
You're telling a story here. It's a train.
Yeah. It's hard to argue with that. It's really hard to argue with that. So Inferno comes out. It's 4 issues, 4 slightly expanded issues that really kind of, they don't close the book on Hickman's time, but they kind of do. If you read House and Powers and Inferno, House and Powers, X-Men and Inferno, which is what I did for my reread, it feels like a great story that you can read as being closed at the end of Inferno if you want to. Obviously, it continues. Inferno's tremendous.
It's real good. Yeah.
We get Moira back in this story. The Mystique and Destiny stuff is elevated to being the primary driver. It's the pivot point that takes us into the next phase. The writing is snappy and tremendous. Now the tables have turned on Charles and Magneto because Mystique played them. She used their images. She became them to circumvent the resurrection protocols and bring Destiny back.
Yep.
So they get to the Quiet Council meeting. Moira has now sternly told them, you need to get Mystique off the council and maybe even kill her and destroy Destiny's file, if you will, like her being, her backup. Thank you. And Mystique goes to Sinister as Charles, and Sinister is fully aware that he is speaking to Mystique, even though she's trying to play it off. And he gives it to her because he's like, you know what? I want to see what's going to happen. So they go to the Quiet Council meeting, and Mystique says, hey, we have a spot on this Quiet Council. I want to put forward a potential member. And who walks through the door but Destiny? You guys remember that moment?
And that was Apocalypse's spot, right? Because he had went to Morocco. Yeah.
There were a couple of empty seats. Jean had left.
True,
Apocalypse had left. Yeah.
Still cool, man.
It's good stuff.
So because that's where it got into like the inner politics of the world, and those are some of the interesting bits that we don't always get explored that Hickman was laying down, and those interpersonal dynamics of power.
And that was Sheedy on art, right? Sheedy did some of it. Caselli did some of it.
I thought the art was great, actually.
every issue had a different artist.
Opeña covers too. I put on the slide. It's issue 2, the Emma Frost issue, where she's holding
Great cover.
Magneto's helmet and Xavier's Cerebro helmet. It's Opeña, I think. Gorgeous stuff.
That opening scene, the opening shot from Inferno, is Emma with the helmet on, resurrecting Magneto and Professor Xavier. And we didn't know why the fuck they were dead. And it's a battle between them and Nimrod and the Omega Sentinel, Karima Shapandar, that leads to them dying. They lose. It's a book full of twists and turns and just revelations and reveals. We learned there that Omega Sentinel was sent back in time, and that in her timeline, the X-Men always win. It proves that Krakoa really was the solution and that it really could have worked. But they sent her back in time with the knowledge of that to work with Nimrod, the realization being that humans are the problem. That human beings are the reason why the mutants always succeed. And that it's machines that will stop the mutants from succeeding. And also the inevitability of the fact that mutants come from humans. Human plus human can equal mutant. So if you're gonna limit, it's the Skynet proposition. Skynet was built to solve war. Well, who causes war but humans? You got to get rid of the humans.
Amen, brother.
And there's that third element added to a traditional binary.
Right.
Like Moira into the Magneto Charles situation. It just
Totally.
complicates mutantdom even more so.
And, you know, again, Moira's questionable morality, she pushes for Magneto and Charles to just kill Destiny. She has no issue with suggesting that. And she's telling them, hey, you guys don't understand. She is the reason we lose in this scenario. She cannot exist. But again, their hubris and their belief that they understand better, they don't do that. They don't kill Destiny. They end up dead. Moira ends up depowered by Mystique and Destiny, and then on the run. Tremendous book. If you haven't read it, read it.
I think I gotta give it another chance. I remember not being satisfied.
I remember that.
Man, satisfaction is such an interesting word to use when talking about this era, right? Because ultimately, can you really be satisfied?
Yeah,
it wasn't over.
None of us are.
That's an issue in my life in general, yeah.
Wow.
Ultimately, it was rereading it was bittersweet for me.
Yeah.
Because it's so good, but it's not the end. And we don't get to see what Hickman wanted to do. Even this iteration of Inferno, he was 100% going to do an event called Inferno. It's teased from the earliest days. But this is not the iteration of that event that we would have gotten. He said it in the EW article. 6 months we've been working to figure out what to do with my absence. And Inferno teased you guys up. Let me tell you a sinister secret. Moira was not supposed to go bad. Not like this.
I think that's pretty clear, honestly.
And that's been my big issue with this back half. Is like Moira was so intrinsic to Hickman's vision. That part of it should have stopped.
It does. That's the problem. But let me break this down. So, we were supposed to get a Moira book. There was supposed to be a Moira book that would fill in the blanks of her various lives and what she does in her day-to-day life and things like that. Al Ewing was the mystery writer that was supposed to do that book. Originally, he didn't see his way into it. He wasn't that hot on it. Eventually, he warmed up to it. He cracked the code. By the time he cracked that code, things were already past the point where the book made sense because Hickman was leaving. And they knew they were going to move away from Moira as a mutant. So now, why even do that book? What is it that Hickman did in Inferno that tees up the writers for the future? The most significant thing is what happens to Moira, depowering Moira, taking that off the table and making her bad. This is what Jordan White had to say about this. Talking about Jonathan's original plans is always tricky for two reasons. The first is because even still, we're not at a place where I would be comfortable, for example, just telling people what Hickman's plans were, because many aspects of them are still going. You never know what we might use. And second, it shows too much of what we're thinking about and what the plans in general were and are. Everybody likes to simplify it as Jonathan had plans and then we got rid of them, and that's just not accurate. Jonathan had plans when he started, and the plans that Jonathan had when he decided to not go with his plans weren't the same plans as the plans he started with, and the plans we ended up with from Hickman weren't the plans, you know what I'm saying? His plans evolved. So how far back does her heel turn go? Quite a ways. Did it go back to the beginning? The answer is no. It did not go all the way back to House of Powers. It was a thing we came up with later, but it wasn't that much later. Everything about Hickman and everything about his stories is complicated. So even the idea of Moira's heel turn is so simplified because is anybody in Jonathan's story really good or bad? It's not like he thought of her as a good character and then he changed her to a bad one. Like, no, she was always a messed up character who pretty much everybody, who's like pretty much everybody in power these days, does some things that are good and some things that are terrible. In the original stuff, she was not going to end up where she is now. Like literally going, I hate Krakoa and I want to murder everybody I used to be friends with. One last thing. Without going into too much detail, it was the same time as the Moira series died is when that happened. X-Men Monday fans remember that we were at a point talking about a Moira series. We had talked to Al about it. He had a pitch for it. It was good. But then Jonathan plans shifted pretty radically and became, oh, actually, instead of doing that, I'm going to do this. Sorry, Al. And the direction that Moira was going in shifted in a big way. But that doesn't mean that we had to radically reinterpret the scenes from House of X. The questionable things she did back then are still the same questionable things she did now. It's just where they ultimately ended up being different.
Man, an Al Ewing Moira book would have been interesting.
Yeah. It sucks that we didn't get that. It really does.
I bet he put his whole wussy into that.
I'm sure it would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when you don't have a singular vision. People get really mad about, and Hickman himself gets mad about the idea that this was an auteur driven thing. You know, he feels like it really was deeply collaborative, and he doesn't want all the credit for everything that went right.
And but maybe that's like, that's what it needed to be, but maybe it shouldn't have been so, and maybe maybe this is our fault. It shouldn't have been so advertised as that, you know?
Yeah. I think it was that until it wasn't that.
Yeah.
And Sean, refresh my memory. Is Inferno, with the gap between Inferno and X Lives, a year, or was it a couple months?
X Live starts like the month after.
Oh, is it that
Inferno
soon after?
ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
X Lives and X Deaths was used to create a gap for the line so that they could get Immortal and everything else started. The Destiny of X era started.
Yeah. There was no time between them.
This is the point at which things completely shift. Now Hickman is gone. He is no longer a part of the line at all. Now there is no head of X. The line is spearheaded largely by Kieran Gillen on Immortal X-Men, Jerry Duggan on X-Men, and Al Ewing on, X-Men Red, basically. Those books were pretty good.
And you get some outliers there, like Exterminators. It's kind of like a side thing. There was a couple of side books that, like, it was on Krakoa or based in Krakoa, but it was kind of doing its own thing. It wasn't really tied into the line.
Yeah. That was something that frustrated me a lot, though. This was the point, really the point where it felt like, okay, there are just too many books that don't need to exist. and it feels like they're playing in a sandbox, not telling a cohesive story. That frustrated me endlessly, and it never ended. That never stopped feeling like the case.
Krakoa became Minecraft at that point. People just playing around in it.
Yeah. Yeah. It needed a little bit more cohesion. It needed more curation. And it just didn't get that.
And we're in the discussion. We're into the Immortal X-Men line of things, right? Is that where we're up to?
Destiny of X, which includes
So
Immortal
like
X-Men.
Gillen, those early issues of Immortal, it felt like something was there. In terms of like, okay, I know the POV isn't Hickman anymore, like the architect isn't Hickman, but Gillen seems like he's lining some pins up to be knocked down. And the whole each issue is its own POV of a character in the Quiet Council, I thought was a really good gimmick that gets dropped off eventually. But yeah, I had early hopes for it.
Yeah.
He was also coming off of the AVX stuff, or like the Eternals. I feel like
AXC,
It's
that was
little,
concurrent.
yeah, it's down the line.
AXC, right? It's right. Like that stuff was, I feel like, better than we might have maybe expected. And Eternals for sure that got a lot of heat. So I feel like I was coming in excited into this new world, and Gillen in general has done good work. So I'm like, cool, for sure. And then Immortal started off hot. But it's about, I think Sean said it earlier, maybe it was Cale. It's a train, right? If the coals die out, then the train's stuck. It doesn't carry the same kind of momentum, and I think it lost a lot of that forward momentum.
Yeah, I completely agree. It just didn't feel like there was a through line anymore. I loved Immortal up until Sins of Sinister. But there was a lot of good stuff in that book. Um, Not a lot of other standouts for me, in my opinion, from this time period. You know, Knights of X was just a continuation of Excalibur and everything that Teeny had already been doing. You know, Betsy Braddock, Captain Britain. There was a Deadpool book for some reason. Marauders by Steve Orlando no longer felt like it fit the bill of what Marauders was initially supposed to be. So that was all really frustrating. And then you look at X Lives and X Deaths, which I wanted to just briefly touch on, and the way that changes Moira. This is, yes, oh, so glad I remembered this. Okay, there's one important beat with Hickman that we haven't touched on. Now, the Moira McTaggart concept, the resurrection angle, is something that he has said was inspired on some level by a book. The book is called The First 15 Lives of Harry August. It's a great book. Awesome. Written by Claire North. In that book, you know, it tells the story of a guy who dies, and when he comes back to life, he remembers his old lives and yada, yada, yada. A lot of people got upset about this and felt it was plagiarism. Claire North herself actually spoke up about this and was shocked to see that her concept was ripped from her pages and put into these comic books. There's a long-standing theory that the reason why they pivoted away from Moira as a mutant and depowered her and everything else was because they were afraid of being sued by Claire. I think that's probably bullshit. I don't think it was plagiarism, and that it's not like that's the idea of somebody resurrecting is not new.
Yeah.
Like someone reliving their lives that's not a new idea.
Or
It's
using
Groundhog's
that.
Day. Yeah.
Well, using that as a storytelling device, that's not new.
Right.
It's a device. It's literally a tool.
And plagiarism's hard to prove because you're gonna come up with something that you got somewhere else. You know, ideas aren't original anymore.
Right.
Whoa, ease up, AI.
Well, I'm just saying your ideas are a culmination of your experiences and things that you've taken in.
My art's not derivative.
Yeah, it is.
Damn.
And so when they depowered Moira and they made her, you know, more machine than person, and they kind of just made her into a generic villain, that is when I started to figure out, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yep.
All the nuance, all the like real thoughtful stuff that was baked in here is gone. Because was Moira a good person before X Lives? Not, I don't know. You know, I don't know how to parse that out. She was doing what she had to do. This is a woman who has lived for 1,000 years and she's seen it all. And she's very unhappy about the 1,000 years she has lived. She's willing to do anything to stop this from happening again.
Yeah,
But-
she was. There's still a level of altruism to it.
But you go and read Hellfire Gala 2023, I believe it is, or 22, excuse me. And she goes to that event as Mary Jane, and she chooses to taunt Proteus and tell him, oh, you know, I never cared about you. You were a means to an end, yada, yada, yada. What the fuck was that?
Completely forgot about that.
She might as well have had a mustache and started twirling it at that point. Yeah, I thought she was going to tie someone to the train tracks.
And that's how she felt during the event with Wolverine, X Lives and X Deaths. Like you might as well put a top hat on her.
They killed all the juice that concept had. And I think even if you look at the way things ended, Moira was never the same character. Now she was a bit player, a part of Orchis that just didn't feel like she mattered very much.
It was such a harsh pivot, and that it felt ham-fisted. And I feel like we all commented on it being that this was a weird way to get into a certain place that was needed for the advancement of. It felt like a plot point, and we're affixing her so that we can appease that plot point.
Well, even the Sins of Sinister quite literally diluted her by cloning her over and over again. It's like, all right, well, now she is no longer a character and it's more of a plot device. She went from being the machine to just being a cog in the machine.
Which just wasn't that interesting.
It wasn't, yeah.
And since you bring it up, let's talk about Sins of Sinister. This was, you know, Sinister is Kieran Gillen's baby. He wrote the X-Men in the early 2010s, I believe, and Sinister was one of his favorite characters. He rejiggered the character to make him more comical and less imposing, very dramatic, had a lot of flair to him. And it was fun, but for me personally, I was never that into that version of Sinister. I think Hickman found a good balance between, you know, fun and kooky, but also kind of scary.
Nefarious.
Right. The Sins of Sinister era took the character and made him the main character. You know, and we got Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants from that, which was written by Al. We got Immoral X-Men, which came from Gillen himself. And we got Nightcrawlers, which came from Cy Spurrier.
Which we all definitely read.
Huh?
Which we all definitely read, Nightcrawlers.
100%.
I think we did, right?
Did we do a review?
I think we reviewed them.
Maybe number one.
Yeah, we were reading Nightcrawlers, yeah. Yeah, that was the one, was it the Ewing one?
No, Nightcrawlers was the Spurrier one, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it was the Spurrier one. Yeah. And yeah, okay.
I don't have many good things to say about this event. Maybe it rereads better now that everything is over. I feel like I was so upset, and I can admit this. I was so upset still by the fact that Hickman was gone. I don't know if I gave the work a fair chance. Maybe I didn't. But Sins of Sinister just didn't. It felt like it was trying to do Hickman stuff, but it was just inferior. And it centered a character that just hadn't been that important prior.
It felt like
the immortal stuff was real. Like it felt like, you know, it could have come from Hoxpox. Like it felt like a real you know, a turn certainly, but a believable one.
The next step.
Yeah, the next step. And Sins of Sinister was just like it interrupted all of that because it became it took away the character focus of Immortal, and it took it across the line. And we came off of AXE, and it just wasn't it wasn't fun.
I hated how it completely upended the whole line. Like all the books stopped, and there were these alternate reality books for a reality we knew would get wiped over by the end of it. It was a big
Eh.
whole. Why does this matter?
And it felt like it took so long.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I remember we as we reviewed it, we were like, I think it continues next month. We'll see. We weren't even sure, and it just kept going. It became a bit on the show. It felt like Gillen took the Chimera bit that we got in Hoxpox with Rasputin and all that, and kind of did a whole bunch from that, which kind of felt like, it's going to sound rude, but it felt like Hickman cosplay rather than Gillen, if that makes sense. Yeah, I was not a fan of it.
So Powers of 10 in the initial, House of Powers exists. The 10, the 0, 10, 100, 1000, however deep that goes, that concept, that existed to show us that this shit always goes bad. No matter how far into the future you want to look, whatever the end game is, it just doesn't go great for mutants. We already understood that. So we didn't need Sins of Sinister to tell us that again. That the future doesn't go well for mutant kind. We know that. So what was the point? I'm always going to have to ask that question. Like I said, I might reread it, but I'm always going to have that question. What was the point of this? Other than fan fiction for Sinister, why did we need this story? To this day, I don't know.
Right.
Was it just so? Was it just so? Okay, go ahead.
Didn't play into the large, like that, the larger through line of even Immortal, which had started that stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. And I don't know that the line ever recovered from Sins of Sinister. Immortal became a book about them in the white hot room, which I think threw a lot of people off.
Yeah.
So many people were seeing that concept for the first time. It wasn't presented in a clean way. It was presented in a very bizarre way in Immortal. And now I just think things were too weird. Like as weird as it was to say that Moira was a mutant and mutants couldn't die and show us 1,000 years in the future and all that shit. I never felt lost in it. Unsure of what I was seeing exactly. Yeah, but that story, you don't always know what you're looking at when you're looking at it, right? But Gillen's stuff just always confused me.
And not only that, it was Gillen and Duggan were kind of the big two there. And I just think they're wildly different writers.
Yeah.
Where I like both of them individually, but I don't think they were complementary.
No, it would have been like Gillen and Ewing would have been perfect.
Sure, yeah. Honestly, if Ewing was the post-Hickman architect, things might have been a little different, honestly.
The weird thing, though, is that Duggan stopped feeling relevant. Like, you don't really need to read X-Men. That book is not important. It's just not. It's dealing with bullshit. Captain Krakoa, MODOK, random stuff, gambling on other planets, like random things.
Yeah. It has its own story, and I think you could justify it if you want to read that story with those character beats. But yes, in terms of the general mythos of the Krakoan era, they're not even on Krakoa. They're in New York. They're in the treehouse.
That's right. Yeah, Central Park.
And even though X-Men Red takes place off planet, it centers Storm, who we deeply care about, and it's telling the story of the Araco mutants, who we have grown to care about, and the war that's happening over there. Now, whether it's important to read or not is less relevant than the fact that it feels like a great story. And it's told in a clean way. Immortal's clearly the most important book, but once you get into Sins of Sinister and beyond, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
And I'm sorry, the X-Men book should be the one that's continuing the legacy numbering of Uncanny should be the flagship title.
Yeah, these are the sins of Marvel at this point. That's what we're talking about. And I don't want to just shit on the Krakoan era post Hickman. We did talk about some of the great stuff that they did, and there are character moments that I would like to just briefly dive into. I know this is getting long, but the big picture just wasn't good anymore. It felt like something that had worn out its welcome. It's sad to me that that's how we felt about it. That by the time the Fall of X rolled around, now all of a sudden they're publishing shit that just is just like, yo, okay, Uncanny Spider-Man with Nightcrawler as Spider-Man. Like, it was funny, I guess. Some people got a laugh out of it, but what the fuck was that?
Dead X-Men.
What was
book.
that about?
The the
Yeah.
book with X-Men who weren't supposed to be able to resurrect, but were resurrected
Anyway,
anyway.
The other thing too is like, it always felt like once we were here, it always felt like we were just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, we knew Fall of X was coming, but you know, if you expand outside of the comics, you knew like X-Men is starting to have a bigger a microscope put on it, and so we knew like it's not going to be Krakoa that's in the movies. So when is that other shoe going to drop?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's something that we talked about on the podcast. Like, what are they going to do with all this? We even speculated what year the Krakoan age was going to end. Because for any era in comics, especially for a specific team or group of characters, for something to last 5 years is pretty remarkable. That can't
Now-
be understated.
yeah,
How-
nowadays.
How long was Hickman's Avengers, Sean?
Oh God, I don't know.
Okay, I'll see if I can figure that out. I'm just curious to compare it to something somewhat comparable.
But I said earlier, Hickman's initial thought was 3 years.
Yeah.
It extended out to 5. And when I use that word extension, it feels like that. It feels like they went way longer than they needed to. And yet, somehow, everybody feels like the end of this thing has felt rushed.
Yeah.
3 years to 5, and they feel rushed at the end. What happened? I really wish we had answers to those questions. We don't. We can't ultimately know what went wrong. We'll never know. You know, maybe in years to come, we'll find out some things. But I don't think there's any way to dispute that something went wrong. Maybe it's as simple as, you guys are right. You know, Revort came on board and he said, okay, you guys need to wrap up. And they weren't ready. Maybe the Fall of X was supposed to be a lot longer than it ended up being. Here are the facts that we know. Jordan White was getting ready to end the Krakoan era, and he was going to be the editor of the next phase of X books. We know that for a fact. We know that there was a plan for a new X-Men #1 that was going to, in some way, shape, or form, refer to the Age of Apocalypse. We know that for a fact. We know that the Era of Apocalypse book that is coming out this Wednesday was always intended to be the stopgap book between the end of the Krakoan era and the beginning of the next one, whatever that was going to be. Those facts make me feel like this isn't as rushed as many of us feel that it is. But you cannot look at the books and deny the fact that something is wrong. Those Rise of the Powers and Fall of the House books don't feel right. X-Men Forever doesn't feel right. Something is wrong.
There's definitely a difference between rushed in story and rushed in the business of it.
That's fair.
You know, what we felt was, we addressed it in some of the panel work in, I think it was X-Men Forever. Like, there were moments where literally one thing would happen and it was resolved in the next panel by a line of dialogue.
Yep.
There were
Like,
full on pages that were just data pages, that were just conversations.
You know what's funny? That actually does happen in Hickman's era as well.
Oh, when he does it, it's
And
fine.
Well, and I believe it, but the thing is, like, when Hickman did it, it was additive.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and I think if you were to go back and read that stuff in House and Powers, especially because the data pages were new and because they were revealing things that we just simply didn't know.
Yeah.
They were just so exciting. But when I got to the AIM thread, the AIM text thread between the Dominions, Sinister and all the Dominions or whatever, I was like, yo, I'm done with all this, man. I can't anymore.
Can't do it.
And then like the order of release was weird. It was like, hey, this book we're referencing, it's a continuation of a book that hasn't come out yet. You have to read that also. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yep.
It felt it's disarray from both the I think narrative end and the editorial end, because I think the rush that was felt on the creator end more than anything else. Like I feel like it wasn't necessarily on us. Frankly, I would have been glad if we hopped out a little sooner, but like they have to come to a more natural conclusion point, and I think that's to what you're saying, Cale. It's on the editorial end, on the back end of what all of this is.
It felt like they hit the brakes. Like it wasn't a car crash, but the books definitely got whiplash from it.
We were the test dummies.
Yeah.
And it seems as though every writer involved in the final phase of Krakoa has teased the idea that something was wrong, that they are not fully happy with the way that things ended.
It was like the actress on the Madame Web press junket. Like, oh, we did this. But hold on, it's not all our fault.
That's sad to me. But I also sort of blame them too, in a way. Like, I hate blaming creators for things that we don't fully understand. So I'm going to be very, gracious toward them. But I truly feel that choosing not to follow Hickman's strategy was a mistake.
I absolutely agree with that.
They should have just followed him.
And to that end, I blame Hickman for that, for not standing up for his story.
Yeah.
To change the title of this episode, Rest in Peace, Krakoa. It's your fault, Hickman.
We're not that kind of channel, I don't think, Mark.
No, sorry.
Do you guys want to hear what Hickman has to say about this?
Oh, yeah.
And special guest, Jonathan Hickman. No.
Oh, my God, dude. Oh, my God. Imagine that.
Stage level. Oh, he's going to present the STACKOA?
He's at Sean's apartment.
Yeah.
We've been sitting here shit talking.
Well, actually, Cale.
He's just like that 50 Cent meme. What do you mean fuck me for? It's just
So here's what Hickman had to say on this. He said, I've gotten both too much credit and too much blame over the last couple of years we've been doing this. I don't mind the blame. I do mind the credit, which is always unfair, especially in this sense. When I'll be out of the room where stuff is being produced. I don't know, man. Spread the love, right? I think, and when asked, do you think this was a success? This is the question that I think is the most important question to ask. Was the great Jonathan Hickman experiment a success? This is what Hickman says. I think it worked in a lot of ways that were intended. I think there were also things we got wrong or could have done better. I think if our only goals were a cohesive line, integrated storylines, and a profitable line of books for the company, sure, for the most part, it worked out great. One, I believe we needed a broader aesthetic, a bigger artistic umbrella. That's something perhaps we could have controlled a little bit better. So right there, he's saying that the look of Krakoa was very centered around what Pepe Larraz and R.B. Silva created in House of Powers. They sought after artists who drew in that style. Russell Dauterman took it and elevated it a little bit, and they kept playing the same beats. Bob Quinn fit that mold very well. They often brought in artists who kind of fit that design. Hickman goes on. Two.
What?
Yeah, I disagree with that point.
You disagree? Fair enough.
Holy.
Okay. Two, I think we needed to maintain a more relentless velocity. Narrative rhythm is good, necessary, I think, in the individual titles, but with a line as big as ours, the whole thing still has to feel like a freight train.
Yeah.
The pandemic really screwed us there. And along with other complications, it's taken us until now to get everything back on track. And the now is post-Inferno. So, while some might think that's one we deserve some grace on, I'd probably argue that grace isn't something you get to ask for in a financial exchange. I kind of agree with that.
Damn, that last part? Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, I think it worked well. I'd give us a B.
It's fair.
Then he is asked, um, is this obviously the ideas in there could still appear on the printed page, but is this something you could see yourself one day releasing, teasing in a newsletter, or eventually seeing print as back matter? Basically, are we going to see your what your plans were? Hickman said this. I understand where this question is coming from. I do get it, but I think it misses the point of the whole X-Men experiment. There is no version of this where I'm putting my plans in my back pocket to save for another day, or some great character beat that I'm holding on to and no one is allowed to use until I get around to it. That's not what this is. Everything I have already done, everything I'm currently working on, and everything I had plans to do in the future belongs to the team. That was the point of having a room of cohesive group of creators working together. I promise you'll see plenty of those ideas and plans executed in other books or amalgamated into the broader concepts. The big questions and resulting conflicts I was getting at aren't disappearing from the line. Those things are baked in. They're inevitable in a lot of ways. It just won't be happening on a timeline that I can work on, which is perfectly fine. The team is going to do great. If anything, I think some of them will flourish without me taking up all the oxygen in the room.
So he expects some of his ideas and concepts that he might have had to be like a Twilight of the Superheroes style for Marvel, to maybe find their way in places somewhere. Like the idea is out there already within Marvel.
Yeah. Well, let's grade. Let's give our grade. Hickman says they it was a B. And obviously that's only what he knew, right? That's only what he saw coming and what they had worked on. So he says B. What do you say?
Well, I say Marco put up a poll, and the options are A plus plus, A, B, and C minus. And I question if Marco ever went to school, but I think B sounds about right. I think it worked enough where I think there is proof of concept that could work better with some more structure. I think it was a little too loose. The fact that he said that he never had anything in his pocket to be used down the line, first of all, I don't think it's true. Second of all, I think he should have. There should have been clear points and story beats that maybe you were working towards to add structure to something.
He's talking about to take those ideas and use them in another place. Like
Sure,
he's saying
okay,
that all the ideas he came up with for Krakoan era all are only for this and nothing else.
It was given out, and it's not like he held on to it himself. Okay, I see it. I see what it means. But yeah, I think there should be more structure if this is attempted again elsewhere.
Yeah, I think I want to give it the A, but that lack of just the lack of some of the cohesion there, I think probably brings it down. There were the bright moments were so up there, and realistically, the low moments weren't that bad. So, I think a middle of the road grade makes sense. Yeah, fuck it, I'll give him an A. Shit was fire.
Yeah, I have a hard time separating the back half from the front half as a whole. Like, it started as the great Hickman experiment. Essentially, the experiment or the Hickman part of the experiment left, and the experiment continued. Like, how do you keep an experiment going when the founder, who has the processes and the impetus and the initial ideas and all of the background information, how do you keep that going when that's gone? Like, that initial inspiration is just, it's gone.
It's like if Oppenheimer left after the first test.
Yeah, we would have been wiped off the face of the earth. Like, I mean, I still give it a B, because I do think that what Hickman did was incredible, and it changed the face of the X-Men. And even with the stuff that came after, like, the stuff Gillen started in Immortal, and then Ewing carried on through, Red and Resurrection, and then Duggan we can just throw in the trash. You know, that stuff was solid. You know, it held firm and it was good. So I say B. And it, you know, the endings that we just had last, you know, the week before and this week were solid. They were stronger than, frankly, they had any right to be.
It almost felt like the ending was like they had the end planned.
Yeah.
Getting there was the rush.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I gave it a B. I think that the first half, it's not even, it probably doesn't even break out that way, but like the Hickman stuff, largely successful. Even the books he wasn't working on, you know, there was some stuff that I dropped. There was some stuff that I didn't love, but it was interesting and fun, and it was new and fresh. Ten of Swords, I didn't love, and that's where things started to get a little weird. And I don't know that the line ever truly recovered from that event.
Which one? Sorry.
Ten of Swords.
Okay.
We started to see less and less of Hickman at that point. By the time Inferno rolled around and we got that story and we knew he was leaving, it was off the rails. I don't think that the line got rejuvenated. You know, I think we got some good stuff in the midst of it. Ultimately, the X-Men have probably never had a better line. If you're talking about, you know, more than just one X book at a time, it's probably never been better collectively than it was during the Krakoan age. I'm not going to say that it all was bad after Hickman. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Even after Hickman, you can still point to, for me, at least 3 titles that I was enjoying the entire time.
All written by Al Ewing.
Sword was pretty great. X-Men Red was fantastic. Like, yeah, totally. And the character moments that we got, even in the midst of horse shit, were incredible. Storm was very well served.
Mm-hmm.
Jean Grey finally got play. She got no fucking play under Hickman.
Yeah, Hickman was not a big Jean person at all.
Apparently not. So a lot of the characters that I care about and love got more play down the road. And some of them were dug in on deeper, like Professor Xavier was dug in deeper. Magneto, the resurrection of Magneto, that was insanely good. Sync is now one of my favorite X-Men, especially after the reread I just did. I want to fucking go back and re-rank him. But I can't ignore the things that I didn't like. I can't. So I have to give it a B. That's a success, though, right? Like, I think it's a success.
I graduated college with a B average, you know, like it's doable.
50% of the audience agrees out of 18 votes.
9 people agree.
Oh, well, there you go.
Are there any character moments or things that you want to quickly point out? We've got to do this to STACKOA. We've got to, you know, do you guys want to?
Mystique and Destiny always jump out to me as like the
same.
two that maybe
That's exactly what I was
benefited
gonna
the
bring up.
most from this as a whole. I think the latter half, Storm really jumps up, but I also think that's because they had plans for her post Krakoa that she needed to be built up like that. But I think Mystique and Destiny became some of my favorite characters ever. I love Mystique. You know, they tried to make her fetch with X-Men First Class. You know, they were like trying to Rebecca Romijn was Mystique in the movies, and she's going to be a good guy in this movie, and she's going to be tied in with Xavier, sure. But I think it wasn't until Hickman got the reins to those characters that I really enjoyed them as much as I did in this.
Can I just real quick, Adam Smith, dude, you are my man. He says Hickman leaving reminds me of the response from Dark Tower fans when Stephen King was hit by a van. I'm not going to derail the podcast to talk about that too much, but yes, exactly. When you read the Dark Tower series, there's a clear difference between before he got in the car accident and after, no doubt.
So
Absolutely.
many more cars.
Didn't he write Misery
Over
too, which was a
on
car
screen.
accident?
No,
Oh,
Misery's not a car accident. No.
Isn't that what happens? That he gets hobbled because of that, and then he gets captured?
No.
No?
He, we.
Okay, yeah, it's
we'll
not a
talk
Stephen
about
King
that later.
podcast. Yeah.
That's not it. Yeah. I'd like to bring up Magneto.
Dang it.
I've never cared so much about Magneto. I like his origin. I think he's a good contemporary villain or whatever, but I've never necessarily seen him with the depth that he was given until the resurrection. And man, that made me love him. And Resurrection coming out, at the same time as X-Men 97. Just I am a Magneto fan 100%. And I think coming out of Resurrection, I think that Magneto is now sort of, and I've said this a couple of times recently, so forgive me, but Magneto has sort of, he's been the long game of mutant that hates humans for mutant supremacy, all the way to mutant that wants peace. But if you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. And that's, he's still got that Magneto edge, but he's fighting for the original Xavier's dream.
And can I just tap in to say that throughout my reread, I was thinking about you and what you said about Magneto, and I agree with you now. You're right. You're absolutely right. The seeds are there. They're definitely there.
Get me a fucking Magneto helmet.
For me, in a similar vein, the Apocalypse sort of growth. I thought that those things were cool to see how even such an extreme ideology can be changed when met with a different kind of reality and hope. And I think it was positive. And I always think back to, like he became, he dove so much into exploring and creating the culture of what would be on Krakoa and imparting that to the children. I think that's incredibly important. Was him and it was almost like ironic, right? This hulking murderer is now telling the children of this new nation, like, this is these are the cool things we've done. This is the future we've built, and we've laid the foundation down, and now it's up to you guys to take it even further.
Hell yeah. For me, Magneto, I won't belabor it. Cale nailed it. Apocalypse, Marco nailed it. Apocalypse was, I remember specifically being angry that Apocalypse was brought on. I was not happy. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. They would never go with this. I see how radical that was and why that was necessary now. And they did amazing work with him. Teeny did a lot of great work with him. Hickman, of course. I think everybody deserves a lot of credit for Apocalypse. Storm, Al Ewing, hats off. Tremendous work. Storm got the rug cut out from under her. She was supposed to have, I don't know how many people even know this. Storm was originally planned to have the child of T'Challa. They were going to have a child together. That child was going to grow up in the world that the children of the Vault are from, and then come out of that as, a perfect fusion of both characters with both of their power sets, and was going to be a major player in future stories.
T'Challa?
Yes.
T'Challa was real?
And Marvel told them, no, you can't do that. We have other plans with Black Panther, and we're not going to let you do that. The work was already completed, so that's why the giant-sized X-Men book with Jean and Emma going to help Storm doesn't make any sense. But yeah. So Storm was done really well. Sync is another one of my faves coming out of all of this. Jean Grey, reestablishing her as the queen of the mutants. I love it so much. I think a lot of characters were done really well. And I don't think anybody was really done too dirty. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Cyclops got some great stuff. Wolverine was cool throughout. I enjoyed Beast's story. A lot of people think that wasn't it, but I was good with it.
Yeah.
Kate. I mean, I'm not going to rattle off everybody's name. I think largely the characters come out of this stronger than they were. And I disagreed with that point before, but I think it's true. We got a super chat from Syncratic. Thank you for the $5 super chat. The $5 Canadian. So what does that translate to for us?
A couple of 10 bits, I think.
He says, what problems of the Krakoan era, even Hickman stuff, do you hope the new era does better? Anybody got an answer for that?
If they have a writer's room and they're launching with all these titles,
Well, don't worry about that.
Yeah, it's not a writer's room.
Yeah.
they need that cohesion to follow through. And if you have to wrap a story, wrap it, man, because I think that's going to be more beneficial to the line, because from there you can probably deviate and split off books off of the end of a story a bit more cleanly than having to linger.
I think what we're getting with the next era is a real rubber band back to what was before Krakoa in terms of editorial style. It's going back to Brevoort's way he did Avengers. That's a decades-long, tried and true way of doing Marvel comics. We'll see if it works. I would like to see this type of. We keep saying writer's room, even though it's not, but I don't know of another way to describe it. But I would like to see the Avengers line done something like that. You know, like I said, with maybe a little more structure, a little more editorial. Leadership, yeah, like putting the foot down. I almost said cojones, but I didn't. But just something a little more. It's okay to say no, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when you are the leader of something, when you're the head of something, it requires you to say no, and it requires you to not take in every single idea. And it requires you to put ideas and concepts through a certain kind of crucible. And some people will not like you for that. And it will upset people when you tell them no. It's just how it is. You know, that happens here every now and then. Hickman and Jordan D. White needed to be a little firmer, maybe, about things. And I am not in their position. Far be it from me to tell them what they need to do and not do. But as a reader, that's what it feels like.
I kind of felt as Hickman as a leader. It's like when your friend gets hired as a manager at the place you work at, and he has to do managerial things, but he's your friend at the same time, so it's conflicting.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah. My answer to this question is pretty short. What problems of the Krakoa era do you hope the new era does better with? Less titles. Oops.
More cohesion. I think we'll all say the same thing, you know, and a little bit more of a shuffling of the deck. You know, they did decent with that, but I think there are a lot more characters that they could have tried to elevate that they didn't. You know, Storm is huge now, but Storm's been big. She doesn't necessarily require an elevation. Whereas characters like Sync really need help. You know, characters like Surge. You know, Moira was helped a lot. Now Moira is one of my favorite characters. I love Moira.
Same, we'll never see her again.
Well,
Sean.
Yeah.
I want to have you answer this question specifically. This was Rami's original question. If you're to summarize the Krakoa era for future readers, what events would you include?
Okay, that's a great question. So I think that you have to read House and Powers, obviously baseline. I personally think you also read X-Men. Core X-Men by Hickman. Those issues are great. They set up a lot of shit. I also think you read, it's not the best, but I still feel like you read Ten of Swords. It's got really good shit in it.
And that Apocalypse stuff, I think is essential.
It's got good shit in it, and it also has shit in it.
Like, you're not going to understand why Apocalypse isn't around, for example. You know, you're not going to understand the struggle that they went through. I think it's pretty critical. I also think you read Inferno. And if you're willing to read individual titles past Hickman, I think you read X-Men Red. I think you read Immortal up until Sins of Sinister. And to be honest, like, given how expensive all this is, unless you're a completionist and you really want to read the entirety of the Krakoan story, you might stop. But if you want the whole story, then I think you can skip Sins of Sinister. I truly don't think it's necessary.
Wikipedia.
Yeah. And then you can read The Fall of the House and The Rise of the Powers and X-Men Forever and X-Men 35 and then close it like that.
The only thing I'd add to that is the resurrection of
Oh
Magneto.
my god, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So that would be my reading list if I were recommending it to someone who hasn't read any of this stuff. And I think
Not bad.
everybody who has read House and Powers should read Inferno. Everybody. Because that's
Why
the book.
Inferno. Damn.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think they should collect Hickman's X-Men into an omnibus. Like that could be readable, like with the Hickman stuff you described. Hoxpox, X-Men, Ten of Swords, Inferno. That could be collected there in chronological order, with X-Men interspersed.
Totally. Let's hit a couple comments. Aaron Ruiz says, I got to go with Moira. Didn't know the character, watched the movies, and didn't remember she was in them. If Sean has Jean Obsession, I got Moira Obsession. Mystique Destiny are a close second. Yeah, hell yeah, man. AC Joe, what plans for Black Panther? That character has been done dirty for a long time. Well, he went to space, and they did a lot of shit with Black Panther.
The actor died.
Yeah. AC Joe, my favorite player is Beast. Revolutionary Dragon says he believes Beast was done dirty. I love that.
Wow.
Yep.
AC Joe said, for someone that jumped in late and taste tested all the X books, I was mostly entertained by Ben Percy, X-Force, and Wolverine stuff. It was fun and by itself. I don't know how much it added to the era, though.
Yeah, totally. I think Ben Percy was probably the most consistent writer out of everybody, other than Al Ewing.
In sheer numbers, too. He has the most.
Exactly. Sean is, that's Atomic Hound saying Sean is. Sean laying out my summer reading plan. Atomic Hound, I would love to hear your thoughts on all this stuff. Yeah, for sure. And I will put the reading notes on the Discord for you. No problem. The reading list, rather. Do we miss any critical comments, or is it time? Is it time to get into the STACKOA?
Let's get that, whip that stack out, Sean.
Let's do it.
Also, oh shit. I'm sorry. I know it's so late. Pete Collins, our boy, our man, Pete Collins, the artist behind the Bardic Verses, a man who I think stock is going to be rising here real soon. He wanted to do something really cool for us. And I'm sorry that I didn't tell you guys. It slipped my mind. My bad. He said he wants to give away an X-Men 92 trading card style commission.
Yo.
He wants to help us with that portion of our giveaway.
Oh, man. I want that.
Right?
Is that for the STACKOA? Like the STACKOA winner gets that, too?
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Unless you guys want to handle it another way. I'm just
No, let's just throw it in.
So if you
Throw it in the
okay.
combo. Yeah.
Yeah.
A showcase. Like Price is Right style.
Huge shout out to Pete for that. Pete is the man. I love the fact that we have genuine artists who are super talented and working in the industry that are a part of our community that want to help us give back to you guys.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Pete, and we'll connect on how to make this happen. Okay, behind me sits the STACKOA. It is the culmination of almost every single book that I bought during the Krakoan era. I say almost because there are certain things that I wasn't able to find because they are where the rest of my comics collection is, and that is not it was just an impossibility. But it's a minuscule number. It's not going to change things dramatically. And we are going to go based on the number of books that I physically have. That is the final number.
Okay.
I know the final number. No one has gotten it right.
Do you know the actual final number of how many X titles there were to see how close you were to completing it? And if now you need to finish completing everything?
The only things that are really absent from this stack behind me are a handful of the early X-Men issues. Because my life has changed a lot throughout the Krakoan era, and I didn't live here when it started. So I would do the show where I used to live, and I would bring the books back there, and sometimes I would forget to bring them over here and stuff like that. So but it's not a large number at all. What I have behind me represents the large majority of what I purchased. Are you ready to see it?
Let's go.
Show it.
All right, here we go.
Tyler, that image is tremendous.
Yeah. And Sean, nod your head no if the books don't count. It's single issues, correct?
Oh damn!
Everything counts.
He just pulled
This
out
is
of
it.
Huh.
the
Too
little
close. Back
the-
up just a little bit.
right there, right there.
A little further, a little further.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, it's
You're
good.
good. You're good. You're good.
Gotta sit behind it, just like and like pose for a second. 2 thumbs up. Damn,
Yeah,
he's
do the Wakanda X, you know?
yeah.
Somebody got a screenshot of that.
Hopefully. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
You had to bag and board all these too, huh?
I sure did. I bagged and board every single one of these suckers.
Oh
Man,
shit.
your hands must have been chapped by the end of this.
So again, this represents everything. This begins with House and Powers #1. I've got it right here.
Wow.
Hey.
Yep. This is my initial copy. I actually have a lot of variants in this pile as well. I've got, because I bought a lot of these multiple times. So like
Interesting.
I have the main cover for Powers of 10, but I also have this variant.
Woo!
Of course you did. Yeah, of
Nice.
course.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, remember when people
Um,
were trying to figure out who Rasputin was from the covers? Damn.
Yeah. It was a fun time. There were some other covers I wanted to show you guys. I have
Oh,
this
dude.
cover, the Art Germ
Yeah.
Mystique cover
Ooh.
for Inferno.
I have that as a magnet on my fridge.
Nice. I have this one, but I like the variants I'm showing you. This is a duplicate. Like I have the regular cover for Inferno one, and then I also have this one. What else? I have House. See what I'm talking about? This is the House
Oh, yeah.
variant. House number
Yeah.
1 variant.
How much know if you have any hidden gem variant?
I kind of do. I have a rare. It's rare because it was only given out at New York Comic Con, but it is a Powers of 10 variant that has New York. I think it has New York in the background, and I have 2 of those. I don't even know how you
Oh.
find those anymore.
That's cool.
That's pretty rad.
I've got this variant
Oh,
for
great.
Hellfire
Yeah.
Gala.
Art germ as well.
Yep. Art Germ.
Ooh, Harris in the chat question, Sean. Would you slab any of those?
I'm not that type of comic book reader. so-
I ain't that guy, pal.
I also wanted to show, I wanted to do this.
The cake cover.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, side by side.
The beginning and the end.
That's me when I walk into a
Style.
bar and I realize there's live music playing.
Yeah.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! What live music do to you?
Oh, Marco ain't hit that age yet.
Cale understands, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Then I also have my hardcover of House and Powers. So what I have now shown you is that I own at least House and Powers #1 3 different ways.
Much
Sean out here.
like Wolverine, Jean, and Cyclops. You have
Hey,
the
yo.
3 ways.
Love 3 ways.
I've got
2 dicks, 3 ways.
4 apparently.
my copy of 10 of Swords,
Uh-huh.
still
Classic. Yeah, still wrapped.
wrapped.
Virgin, yes.
And then I've got my copy of Inferno that I read, and the copy of Inferno that I haven't read that is still in its bag and will be
Yeah.
going to one lucky winner.
And that was a casualty of you also pre-ordering something and forgetting, right?
Yeah, I pre-ordered it. I forgot I did that. I bought it at Midtown, and then the shit came to my door. I'm like, wait a second.
Thank God you don't collect toys, Sean. That would be such a plague on you.
You're not kidding.
All right.
So-
should we start the guesses?
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to throw them in the chat.
Atomic Hound says, "Hold the line at $2.99."
All right, everybody, stop throwing fake numbers out there. Get the real ones. Get your real guess into the chat. Let's go.
And also, can you see it okay? Like, do you guys have
Yeah.
a
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
like you to stack them all in one pile.
No,
They're gonna collapse. Most
Yeah.
likely.
Carefully.
that throws me off too.
Oh, okay. All right.
You're not guessing.
Oh damn. All right,
Well,
well.
you can certainly guess.
You can do a
just
prop
can't
guess. He
win.
just won't win.
I'll see how high I can stack them.
One Sean's worth.
All right, 285, 242, 299. I got $1, Bob. Anyone going for anyone going for one? All right, is anyone betting that everyone will go over?
Oh, 299 is a guess.
That's a lot, man.
Damn, dude. I want to say in each of those piles, I would think is like 30. And they were
I genuinely can't gauge it. I genuinely like, to me that could be 20. It also could be 50. I don't know.
30 times.
Oh, Harris says 403. Woof.
Damn. I have a guess.
So, Sean, are you counting the books as one book?
Yeah.
Or are we
Okay.
cutting those out and just doing issues?
No.
Okay.
Do those as one.
I have
Okay,
the count for individual issues, but then I have the count of factoring these in, which is just +4.
Just plus 4. Okay. Whatever you guys +4.
Atomic Hound, much like Krakoa, the STACKOA must fall.
has to come down someday.
Yeah. Well, this is the last time that all these books are going to be organized like this.
I'm
Has it?
gonna say.
Go ahead,
you
Mark.
go.
No. I'm gonna make a joke. You can go and be
Oh.
serious. Yeah.
I'm gonna say, based on the dimensions of the book, it looks like you have a good amount of a certain amount stacked there. 25 to 30 feels like a comfortable number. I might be off one or. I'm gonna say you had 5, 174.
Okay.
Okay. Sean, can you put a can of Coke there for reference, for scale? A banana for scale?
I don't have either one of those things on hand.
Okay.
Man's
all
is
right.
healthy.
I have a jar.
Okay. Is there a Jean Grey figure in there? What's going on? I'm Marco, what'd you say?
I said 174.
Okay. I'm still not sure. Cale, do you have anything?
Boy. I'd say 127. There's absolutely nothing behind that number. Don't read into that.
I'm gonna go with 1. I'm playing Price is Right rules on this.
Nice.
That's funny.
So we've got Promiscuous Time Traveler said looks like 476. We have Adam Smith was 242, Hound with 299, Chad with 285, Harris says 403.
Damn.
Rami says 327. Syncratic coming in with the devil's number at 666. Gordon has amended their guess to 198. Philosopher King says 345. Smokey Collect says 265. Gavin, what's up, Gavin?
Yo.
Popping into the chat to say 212.
That's a good number.
Promiscuous Time Traveler amended. They said 284. Mike Elliott says 227. Heroic Age says 251. Cole says 175.
Cole, recent Pals polls winner.
Oh yeah.
Press that number.
Izzy, when we opened the chat, said I've got to do a lot of driving today, so I won't be able to be active in the chat. But the final guess is the STACKOA is 169 individual issues, coming to a total of $890.
I like the maths on that.
LTRX says 193.
Damn.
Right.
Sean, did anyone get it exactly?
I don't think so.
Okay, he said I don't think so.
Wow.
Okay. So, any more guesses? You guys ready for the number? We doing this?
Yeah.
They've slowed
Right.
down. I think that's everybody that's gonna guess.
Locked in.
The actual final number is 250 on the dot.
Whoa.
Individual,
Yeah.
and then plus 4, so
Heroic Age
254.
did 251. No.
Who said that?
Heroic
Heroic
Age,
Age.
right over.
Holy shit.
I think.
But-
Yeah, we can't go over.
No, but wait, Sean, that was 250 individual issues plus the 4 books is 254.
Yeah.
So he's good.
Okay.
Heroic Age,
Heroic Age.
251.
Holy
Yeah,
Oh
251.
yeah, because
cow.
the books were counting. Yeah.
Holy shit. So do we count the books?
I think so. Yeah.
You said you count them already before we asked for guesses, so we got to count them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Wow. Well done.
251. Heroic Age 616. Got it.
Awesome. Congratulations. You win a copy of Inferno, the one that's still in the wrapper. And then we will you got to be able to reach out to us though. So if you can't, you got to get us on Discord or Twitter or wherever, and we can sort this whole deal out.
Yeah, please.
Adam, you were close. You were close. You were the next one.
What number did Adam have?
242.
Oh, damn.
Without the books, Adam would have won, but we said the books count. So
Right.
That's the way the cookie crumbles. But that's the STACKOA.
Damn,
Wow.
dude.
Yep. It represents one of my favorite, times in life as a fan of comics, as a collector of comics. It represents a lot of significant life changes for me. Some of the best years of my life, not because of Krakoa, but as a part of that. And I can say with certainty that I'm going to miss this era tremendously for all the failings and all the sins and everything else. Really, this was an incredible time and a wonderful ride that I'm never going to forget. And I don't know that it'll ever be achieved again. Not at these heights. I think the next incoming era has a lot to live up to, and it's going to be tough. But I wish them well. They don't have a Hickman this time. I think as far as the experiment goes, we will see this again really soon because we will see it at DC with Absolute Comics.
Mm.
But the future,
Oh, yeah.
the future for the mutants, I hope it's bright. I want it to be good.
I think so. I think, especially coming off that last issue, I'm hopeful and excited for it.
Oh my God. How many pounds does the STACKOA weigh? That's what Gavin asks. I don't know, but I can tell you that I can't lift this pile right here. It's heavy. It is heavy.
According to Philosopher King, there were 727 comics in the Krakoan era, so Sean owns 34% of all Krakoan comics.
Damn. That's not high.
you got to go back, much
Yeah, I
like
guess
I
much
would
like
be-
Jack and Kate, Sean. You need to go back.
Have to go back.
Because what it was that I dropped a lot of books
Right.
fairly early.
And Pals Pulls wasn't really a thing for the first half of it, really. So
Yeah, we would review books on the show, on the main show, at that point in time, but we reviewed pretty much only the most important things. So, Gino France Jr. says, an excellent time. The X-Men were brought back in prominence in a big way with the Krakoan era. I will miss it, but I'm excited for what the future holds for the From the Ashes era. Yeah. I really want to give them a try. I want to give them an honest shot. I'll be honest. I'm sad about Krakoa ending, especially going back and reading some of this stuff. It's a bummer. It's an era that was filled with so much promise and excitement. You never knew what was going to be different from book to book, how they were going to flip the script on you. And you rarely get to feel that excited about comics because of the cyclical nature. Most of the time, runs are doing, to some amount of degrees similar to what you've already seen.
and not only that, there is a community that was built up around this outside of the comics from this. Like the Krakoa fan community on like Twitter or X, whatever the hell it is now, is huge. There's podcasts that have come up because of this.
You're looking
Yeah.
at one.
Totally. It spawned podcasts, it spawned huge conversations across social media. People loved the X-Men votes, getting to be a part of those things. It's the end of an era that wasn't always pretty, but it was beautiful. Hats off to everybody involved for an amazing job. A job well done. A success. Thank you to all the creators. And thank you to you guys for listening to all of our reviews and our conversations about these books. It's been incredible. And hopefully you'll stick with us because we ain't going anywhere. The X-Men aren't going anywhere, and neither are we. We will be here for the next era just as much as we were for this. Whew. All right. Somehow we still have a little bit of business to do, but I think we're gonna have to not do it all. I do want to mention Patreon. It wouldn't be a Comics Pals episode without it. If you guys have enjoyed this, if you enjoyed this STACKOA, if you enjoyed our post-mortem on the Krakoan era, patreon.com/thecomicspals is the best way to show your support for what we do. We thank you to everybody that does that. We love to give you bang for your buck, as you can see. But I do want to take this time to say a special shout out to the best pals in the universe. Thunderstruck Rebecca Alejandro, the Hound of Justice Atomic Hound, Starcross Catherine Stars, Red Spiral, Spiral Storm. And I also want to thank the Night Stalker Harris Dajinski, Brian Demolisher Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, Momentum Mike Elliott, Dan the Truth Trudeau, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer, Marley Manistorm, Slow Flow Dameron, Christian Uncaged Harriet, Always Laughing, the Spear of Justice Izzy Spears, the Great Destroyer Hyper Viper 89, the Storm of Pain Sanji San, Adam and Bernie the Best Boy, Robert Run It Back Cashaback, Pete the Dreamweaver Collins, and Matthew Malice Price. Huge thank you to every single person I just named. You guys are the MVPs of this podcast. You make this whole deal possible. Thank you so much for your support and love. We love you right back. Next week is episode 400. It's the big 400. We are going to be spilling the beans on the Comics Pals origin story for the very first time in the history of the podcast. You've been listening to us for however long you've been listening to us, but we've been doing this for 7 years, and no one knows our origin story. So we're going to celebrate that. We're going to celebrate ourselves. We're going to celebrate you guys. If you want to partake in the celebration, you can send your messages to us, your video comments, your audio. We will integrate those into the show next week if we get any from you all.
We've gotten some on Instagram, actually. Yeah.
Oh,
wow,
I didn't even know that.
Yep.
Beautiful. Contact at thecomicspals.com, Instagram, however you want to reach us is perfectly acceptable. Get those messages in. We really, really want it to be a mutual celebration. Discord. This Tuesday on Discord, we're going to be doing a hangout. Not just with the patrons this time around. We're inviting everybody into the fold. Everybody is welcome. We want to hang out with you. This is the week of the celebration. And it's not just about us. So if you're on a member of our Discord, you are welcome. Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Come chill with us. We'll be on voice chat. We want to hear your voices, your sweet, sweet voices.
Those dulcet tones.
Yes. It will be moderated. No bullshit. But if you're cool and you're chill, you're more than welcome to come hang out with your boys. I promise it'll be a lot of fun.
This is Tuesday the 11th.
Yeah.
This upcoming Tuesday, as you're listening to this, as we're live, Tuesday, June 11th.
Chillmonger, but is it a real anniversary or are you doing the artificial milestone thing? No, this is genuinely episode 400.
It's
But
not the 400th thing we've recorded.
No.
It's the 400th episode of this show.
Right.
The main title, yes.
We're just trying to 700 and see who noticed.
Well,
if we want to go to legacy
we-
numbering.
We had a couple of lost issues, you know.
That's true.
Oh yeah, the lost episodes. Damn, I think I still have those on my hard drive.
Oh, that would be excellent.
No.
Gavin says he'll be here. I'm glad for that, Gavin. I'm excited for all of you to show up. for this monumentous occasion. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So again, that's next Saturday is episode 400. Tuesday is the hangout.
Aaron Ruiz says, "Is there going to be a retcon of Tyler was always there?" No, we've already done that on YouTube. So
What do you mean? Tyler's always been a part of this.
I've been here the
Retcon.
whole time.
Yeah. There it is.
Do you have it in you to do the number 2s of our top 5s, or should we just hold that for next week?
Oh no, I have it in me.
I have it. Okay.
All right.
I know Cale's got it too.
yeah, I did my homework. So
This is the top. We've been counting down our top 5 Comics Pals moments in the history of the show. This is number 2. Next week will, of course, be number 1. If you guys have yours, share them in the chat now. Leave them on our Discord, whatever you want to do. Who's up first?
I'll go.
Who's on second?
Oh, all right. I'll go. Number 2 for me is this past New York Comic Con. It was my interview with Daniel Warren Johnson that I did. That personally, so my first interview for a comic book creator was Ryan Brown, and it wasn't on the show, and it was a mess. I did a horrible job. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was shit, and I released it, and I felt horrible about it. Doing this show and then having to do interviews at New York Comic Con and stuff, I've gotten much more comfortable with that. And I think the Daniel Warren Johnson one, not to like toot my own horn, but I think I nailed it. I felt good coming out of it. And then I was like, man, this is fun to do. This feels good. It's just cool to talk to people like human beings who like do like things on paper that are, you know, better than I've ever seen. And just felt good to do. So that's definitely my number 2.
yeah, your interview with Chip this year was tremendous.
Sound issues aside, but yeah.
Well, you can only do so much, you know, but Marco?
My is, I'm pulling it up, the beginning of what became kind of like a year-long conversation of the industry and, you know, COVID affecting the real world of comics. It is episode 189, DC Dumps Diamond, followed by episode 190, DC Diamond Fallout. And that was when I felt like the stuff that we're doing on this show is beyond the scope of the creators and, you know, the
books.
Yeah, right. And like one of the things we always say is, you know, we do talk about the industry, and that was where we leaned in hard into it. I mean, not just because that was the only thing to talk about, but I think because we all came from it from very different perspectives. And so yeah, I just appreciated that it felt like we were part of comics history in that way, of commenting on what was going on, having those discussions, seeing what the fallout might be, and just discussing how it plays out.
That was a very fun time. And I remember when we had Jeff Johns on, he was like, so what did you guys talk about when there were no books coming out?
That's right.
We were like, the fact that there are no books coming out.
The potential collapse of the industry. What do you mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh cool.
Yeah, I felt great about that time too.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. One of Marco's number 2 moment is COVID.
Damn.
I'll go next. I'll give Cale his moment. So my number 2 is actually the aforementioned Jeff Johns interview. I met Jeff Johns first when I was a lad. Whenever the DC Universe game was coming out, the online MMO game.
Yeah.
Warcraft edition, yeah.
And Jeff Johns and Jim Lee were doing a signing at Comic-Con. And they had like a little like not an after party, but like a get together. You could go get your poster signed, and you know, it was a really cool moment. You know, I got to shake his hand, and I was such a big fan of him and Jim, and I couldn't believe that moment was happening for me. You know, to the point where all these years later, of course, I still remember it. There's no chance that he ever would. So flash forward to 3 years ago, the podcast changes dramatically. We had 2 other hosts who left the show, and I was very scared. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I just knew that I wanted to continue. I knew that I wasn't done. And Marco and Cale committed that they weren't done. But what happens next? We did the show. We brought on Tyler, one of the best decisions we made. And a year later, we get an email from Brian Cunningham, who is a well-known, well-respected editor in the industry, who says, hey, I love what you guys do. I would love to send you some, early copies of some of these books that Jeff is working on. At the time, it was Junkyard Joe. We had reviewed Geiger, and I was pretty hot on it. And I think largely we were hot on it.
We had uncolored Junkyard Joe pages.
Yeah. Uncolored. Some things even changed in translation. But he said, if you would like to interview Jeff Johns, let me know. I was really freaked out by that, because how the hell could we interview Jeff Johns? He doesn't do interviews. Like, if you go and look before our interview with him, there aren't many. So up until the moment that he came on the show, I wasn't sure he was actually going to make it, but we needed to say yes. And we did. And he showed up. Jeff Johns has joined the Zoom call. And we spent 2 hours with the man himself. And it's one of the highlights of my life. It validated that we could do this, that we're decent at this, that we're good at this. His validating us and our commitment level made me feel like, oh shit, yeah, this has been worth it. Fuck the fact that we've been getting 50, 60 views, and trying so hard and busting our asses and showing up every single week, regardless. The fact that Cale does the show at fucking god awful hours, all the things we went through. Having someone like that, who I've only ever known as a fan, validate this, it meant the world to me. And everything has changed since then. I believe we got the best Jeff Johns interview that exists. I believe that he loved doing it. And that's testament to the fact that he's come back a few times.
Yeah.
Like, I know him, I've spoken to him on the phone. Like, that's a relationship that has developed and grown. And it's all because of that episode. That episode has a lot of significance to me. And that's why it's my number 2.
I was looking through my hard drive, and from my old computer, and I found I still have the screenshot of when we got his email. Oh, hell yeah.
Dude, we go to New York Comic Con this past year, and he just hugs us. I'm like, what? Huh?
Like, hi, hello. He knows our names.
Yeah. Blew my mind.
Yeah.
Cale, why don't you blow our minds with your number 2?
Blue water!
It's time for
Flush
Down the Gym.
Flush
Down the Gym.
Hey! Flush
Down the Gym.
Flush
Down the Gym.
You think I don't know a toilet when I see one?
Did you make that?
Yeah. My number 2 is, well, a number 2. Unlike Sean, whose moment was when we were at our peak. Mine was potentially when we were at our lowest. We were trying bits. And Sean was like, he had as tight as his hold was on the reins. Boy, they were so loose. So
I was in my Hickman era.
But Phil, Marco, and I would try bits, and this was mine. I had this theme in my head for months, and I had to get it out. It was a project I had to get out of my head, and it was my podcast within a podcast to review bathrooms. Because when I was at Avengers Infinity War in Luxembourg, I could see from the men, there was a window, I kid you not, a window from the men's bathroom into the women's bathroom. And I had to do it. I reviewed it, and then that was it. It was awful. And there was one other time that I was able to pull this out. I did a ranking of the Avengers bathrooms. The problem quickly became that day I'd also chipped my tooth. So you can, if you listen, you can hear me cutting my tongue on trying to do this joke, and I'm lisping at the same time. Oh, it sucked. But I was so proud. I was looking for this theme last night, and I went to bed just going, flush down the chair. Flush down the chair. I just, to this day, it was so dumb. I love it so much.
But what's funny is we had a listener not that long ago reference that.
That's right.
Paul?
You know what? As dumb as it is, the people loved it.
Amazing.
All of
Spectacular.
All three of them.
So those are our number twos. Cale's in particular.
Hey.
What are yours? If you have moments, please do share them. We love when you guys contribute your thoughts about us because we are egotistical and we like to hear nice things about us. Just kidding. But yeah, next week we'll be presenting our number ones. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited about mine. I'm sure you guys are excited about yours. And it's just going to be a big celebration episode. Structure-wise, I don't even know what to expect. I have to figure those things out, but I just know that it's going to be a really fun time, and I'm so excited for it. You know, it feels like we're stepping into our new era, you know, but it's not from the ashes because honestly, this year has been the best year ever for us.
The reign of the pals.
It's from the asses, more like it. Yeah.
Hey.
It's hard to understate just how big things are getting for us, and you guys are the reason. You know, if you can hear my voice right now, you're the reason. Just you being here with us live in the future, whatever, supporting us the way you guys do. You know, you have shown up and gone to bat for us. Just this week, we were featured in BJ Kick's Comics Are Dope. He did a video about the 5 channels that he's envious of. And we were number 1 on that list.
We were number 1?
We were number 1.
Number 1.
We were number 1, and it's because of this environment that we have. You know, he said he wished he was younger so he could be a part of this. You know, that he had more free time so he could do this with us. And that was always my vision. That was always what I personally wanted, and I know the other guys feel similarly. I want you guys to feel like you're here with us.
Not me, but I had to adopt it because I came in late. So yeah.
Right. Thank you, CW Gordon, for becoming a VI pal, joining the channel membership. Thank you so much, dude. He says, this channel rules. One of my first episodes was discussing Hickman's episode a couple years ago. Feel like I've been here forever. So this end of Krakoa episode has been emotional and fun. Thanks, pals. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. One of the OGs of the OGs. Whew. All right. I think we'll call it there. You guys have been real for... Oh, no, not yet. Let me read Adam Smith's comment. I was curious if you 4 thought about doing a show charity. Almost like we can sponsor young readers without much money, like a pen pal, but instead a comic pal. That's a great idea. It's a great idea.
I like it. Logistically, we had to figure out how that worked, but
I
like
have
the idea.
no idea. Yeah, I have no idea how to do something like that, but I love the idea.
I know people who work in nonprofits and stuff like that. I could mull it over.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Up for charity? Ooh.
Yeah, next week is going to be a huge celebration. Giveaways galore. Discord's going to have some giveaways coming this week. Lots of fun. Stay locked in with us through all the social channels. Our Discord server is the best way to keep up with everything that we're doing. You guys rock. Love each and every one of you. Thank you for sticking through this 3+ hour episode. If you have been here since the jump, you are crazy, but so are we. We love comics. This shit's crazy. It's all crazy. And that's what it takes to be a comic fan. Thank you so much for
insanity.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.